I learned the truth in the moment I should not have survived. When the Manifold shattered and the God-machine spirit broke free, I stood in the space between titanium and deity. The Mechanicus teaches that titans are weapons, that Princeps are their masters, that the machine spirit serves the Omnissiah's chosen. I believed this once, as all tech priests do. Faith is strongest before you touch the bare current of a god's rage. Now I know what we truly do in those cathedral-sized hulls. We do not command gods, we cage them. My name is Vayara Sunt. I served the Adeptus Mechanicus for 47 years before I learned what service truly costs. Before I understood what stands behind the armor plates of a warlord titan. Before I touched the Manifold and felt what we have imprisoned there. I was born on Mechanicus, a forge world where the sky burns red with the exhalations of 10,000 manufactorums. The air tastes of promethium and sacred oils. The ground trembles with the rhythm of machinery older than most human civilizations. I never knew silence. From my first breath, the hymns of production surrounded me. The bass thunder of drop forges, the screaming of plasma cutters, the endless grinding of assembly lines that stretched to the horizon. But above all other sounds, I remember the walking. Every 14 days, the god machines would stride across the proving grounds beyond the primary hive. Even from 50 kilometers away, you could feel them. The cups on our table would tremble. Dust would fall from the ceiling in thin streams. And if you pressed your ear to the metal walls of our habitation unit, you could hear it through the planet's crust itself. The footfalls of titans, each step a declaration of humanity's mastery over war. I was 9 years old when I first saw one clearly. A Reaver-class battle titan, its armor the deep blue of Legio Metallica, its carapace adorned with Gothic script declaring its name and honors. It stood perhaps 100 meters tall, a walking cathedral of destruction. Its plasma blast gun could vaporize a building with a single shot. Its void shields shimmered in the air like heat haze, capable of turning aside fire that would melt through meters of armor plate. But what struck me, what carved itself into my young mind with the permanence of acid on steel, was not the weapons or the shields, or even the terrible majesty of its form. It was the way it moved. Not like a machine, clanking and mechanical, but like something alive, something that chose each step with purpose, something that saw. I asked my gene father what I had witnessed. He was a tech priest of the 3rd rank, his body already half replaced with the blessed augmetics of the Omnissiah. When he spoke, his voice emerged from a vox grill rather than lungs, each word precise and emotionless. "You have seen a god machine of the Collegia Titanica," he said, "the greatest weapons humanity has ever created. The defenders of the Imperium, the right hand of the machine god himself. But how does it walk like that?" I asked. "Like it knows where it wants to go?" My gene father's remaining organic eye focused on me with sudden intensity. "A sophisticated cogitator array processes tactical data and environmental factors," he replied. "Machine spirits of exceptional complexity coordinate the movement of hundreds of tons of armor and weaponry. There is no mystery here, only technology we have not yet fully comprehended." Even then, I heard the lie in his words. Not in what he said, but in what he did not say. I devoted my childhood to understanding. I consumed every text on Titan construction our HAB unit's data access could retrieve. I memorized the specifications of every pattern and class. I learned the names of the great legios, the Titan legions that had fought since the Great Crusade itself. Legio Ignatum, the Fire Wasps. Legio Mortis, the Death's Heads. Legio Astorum, the Warp Runners. And of course, Legio Metallica, my world's own, the Iron Skulls. At 14, I entered the Mechanicus proper, submitting to the first augmentations that would remake my flesh into something more suitable for the Omnissiah's service. The pain was exquisite and holy. They replaced my eyes with optic implants that could perceive 17 spectrums of radiation. They removed my hands and installed manipulator mechadendrites that could work with the precision of a molecular assembler. They opened my skull and inserted cognitive enhancers that tripled my processing speed and granted perfect recall of everything I witnessed. With each enhancement, I moved further from baseline humanity and closer to the sacred ideal of flesh perfected by metal. Yet, I remained focused on a single goal. I would join the Collegia Titanica. I would understand the god machines. I would learn their secrets. It took 23 years. 23 years of study, of proving my worthiness, of climbing through the labyrinthine hierarchies of the Mechanicus. I specialized in plasma reactor technology, becoming one of perhaps 300 tech priests in the entire sector who could perform maintenance on the catastrophically powerful reactors that powered Titans. I learned the sacred rites of void shield calibration. I mastered the liturgies of weapon blessing. I submitted to further augmentation until my body was more adamantium and ceramite than flesh. And finally, on the day I reached my 37th year of life, I received the notification I had spent half my existence pursuing. Tech Priest Explorator Vayara Sunt, you are hereby assigned to Legio Metallica, Gamma Manipel, Engineering Support Cadre. Report to Titan Bay. 7 within 6 hours for orientation and duty assignment. The Omnissiah's blessing upon your service. I remember standing in my quarters, holding the data slate with manipulator tendrils that no longer trembled because I had programmed the tremor suppression subroutines myself. I remember the cascade of emotional responses my remaining organic brain components generated. Joy, pride, vindication, fear. That last one, I suppressed. There was no place for fear in service to the machine god. The walk to Titan Bay 7 took me through corridors I had never accessed before, deep into the Forge world's restricted sectors. The walls here were thicker, the doors more heavily armored. The air itself felt different, charged with electromagnetic resonance that made my optic implants flicker. Warning sigils adorned every surface. The skull and cog of the Mechanicus, overlaid with high Gothic script, declaring this ground sacred and forbidden to the unworthy. I passed through 3 security checkpoints, each requiring progressively deeper authentication. At the final gate, a tech guard sentinel examined my credentials with suspicion before allowing passage. "First time in the cathedral?" he asked, his voice emerging from a vox grill identical to my gene father's had been. "Cathedral?" I queried. "You'll understand soon enough," he replied, and opened the door. The space beyond defied immediate comprehension. My optic implants struggled to parse the scale of it. The chamber stretched upward for perhaps 300 meters and spanned at least a square kilometer. The ceiling was lost in darkness and industrial haze, studded with arc lights that provided illumination measured in the tens of thousands of lumens. And standing in neat rows, like soldiers at attention. 7 of them. 3 warhounds, scout-class titans that stood a mere 14 meters tall. 2 reavers, the middleweight hunters. And towering over them all, 2 warlords, the largest class of battle titan in common deployment, each standing over 30 meters tall, bristling with enough weaponry to level a city. I stood transfixed, my consciousness overwhelmed by sensory input. The titans were not powered, standing in dormant silence, but even inactive, they radiated presence. Each hull was adorned with scrollwork declaring its name and lineage. Each had fought for centuries, perhaps millennia. The armor showed evidence of countless repairs, battle damage patched and re-blessed, sacred oils anointing every surface. Impressive. Are they not? I turned to find the speaker. A tech priest, of considerably higher rank than myself, judging by the extensive augmentation and the quality of his robes. His designation sigils identified him as Magos Explorator Draven Kurth, primary Enginseer for Gamma Manipel. "They exceed all descriptive capacity, Magos," I replied. performing the correct cant of respect. "That is the appropriate response," Kurth said. "Those who see them and feel nothing are not suitable for this service. Come, I will show you your primary assignment." He led me across the bay's deck, our footsteps echoing in the vast space. Tech priests and servitors worked among the Titans, performing the endless maintenance that kept god machines operational. I observed the reverence with which they approached their tasks, anointing components with blessed unguents, reciting prayers over every adjustment, treating the machines not as equipment, but as living entities deserving of worship. We stopped before one of the Reaver-class Titans. Its armor was painted in Legio Metallica's blue, decorated with iron skulls and high Gothic script that declared its name, Ferrum Deus, Iron God. "This will be your charge," Magos Kurth stated. "You will be responsible for plasma reactor monitoring, void shield maintenance, and weapon system calibration. The Princeps is Maximara Vorn, a veteran of 83 engagements. The Moderati are competent. The Titan itself has served for 4,217 years. 4,000 years. The number stunned me. This machine had fought when the Emperor still walked among men. It had seen the Horus heresy. It had survived the shattering of the Imperium and its slow rebuilding. It was older than some civilizations. "I am honored beyond words, Magos," I said. "Do not be honored yet," Kurth replied, and something in his tone made my threat assessment subroutines activate. "You have maintained machines. You have blessed weapons. But you have never worked with a god machine before. They are not like other equipment, tech priests sunt. They are not passive vessels awaiting our commands. I have studied extensively," I began. "Study and experience are not equivalent," he interrupted. "You will learn this truth soon enough. Tell me, in all your research, what did you learn about the Mind Impulse Unit, the Manifold?" I replied immediately. "The neural interface system that connects the Princeps to the Titan's systems. It allows for reaction times impossible with manual controls, creating a seamless bond between pilot and machine. That is the technical description," Kurth said. "Now I will tell you what that description fails to convey. The Manifold does not simply connect Princeps to Titan. It dissolves the boundary between them. The Princeps experiences what the Titan experiences, feels its weapons as extensions of their body, senses damage to its armor as wounds to their flesh. And in return, the Titan knows the Princeps, knows their thoughts, their fears, their very essence." He paused, his augmetic eyes focusing on me with unsettling intensity. "You will maintain the physical components of Ferrum Deus," he continued. "The reactor, the shields, the weapons, but you will never touch the Manifold. You will never approach the Mind Impulse Unit. You will never attempt to understand the connection between Princeps and God Machine. That realm is forbidden to you. Do you comprehend?" "I comprehend, Magos," I replied. "Do you?" he asked. "Then understand this as well. You maintain the flesh. You will never touch the soul." Those words, spoken by the Tech Guard Sentinel's voice, echoed by my new superior. A warning I did not yet understand. A truth I would learn through horror and revelation. But in that moment, standing before Ferrum Deus for the first time, I felt only eagerness. I had achieved my life's ambition. I stood in the presence of the god machines. I would learn their secrets. I was a fool. The next weeks passed in intensive training. I learned the specific requirements of Reaver-class maintenance, the prayer forms for plasma reactor blessing, the correct unguents for void shield emitters. I memorized Ferrum Deus's complete technical specifications, every modification and repair performed over its 4 millennia service history. I met the other members of the engineering cadre, tech priests and servitors, who had maintained this specific god machine for decades. And I met Princeps Maximara Vorn. She came to inspect the maintenance bay during my second week of service. and I understood immediately why she had survived 83 engagements. There was something in her eyes, a distance, as though she stood very far away even when physically present. Her body showed extensive augmentation, neural interface ports visible at her temples and spine, but unlike most Mechanicus modifications, these seemed to hurt her. The skin around them was inflamed, weeping a clear fluid that had to be constantly cleaned by medical servitors. "You are the new reactor specialist," she stated, her voice flat and effectless. "Yes, Princeps," I replied. "Tech Priest Explorator Vayara Sunt. I am honored to serve Ferrum Deus." Something flickered in her eyes when I spoke the Titan's name. Not quite recognition, more like pain. "Have you ever experienced the Manifold?" she asked. "No, Princeps. I am engineering support, not command crew." "Good," she said. "Never seek that experience, Tech Priest. Never wonder what it feels like. Some knowledge is not worth the cost of acquiring it." Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, her gait slightly unsteady, as though her legs did not quite obey her completely. I noted this anomaly, flagged it for monitoring, and returned to my duties. I did not understand then what I had witnessed. The first stage of what would consume her. What consumed them all. The awakening of a Titan is not a mechanical process. It is a ritual, a sacrament, a negotiation between the living and something that exists in the spaces where flesh and iron blur into unity. I witnessed my first activation of Ferrum Deus on the 19th day of my service to Legio Metallica. The notification came through my neural interface at 0300 hours. All engineering personnel to report to Titan Bay 7 for pre-activation rituals. This would be a test walk, a standard procedure to verify all systems following a maintenance cycle. Nothing extraordinary. A routine exercise I would perform hundreds of times in my service. I arrived to find the bay transformed. Incense burners had been positioned around Ferrum Deus, filling the air with sacred smoke that carried the scent of blessed oils and synthetic frankincense. Tech priests formed a circle around the god machine's feet, chanting the litany of awakening in High Gothic, their voices creating harmonic resonance that my audio receptors detected as carefully calculated frequencies designed to activate dormant machine spirits. Princeps Maximara stood before the Titan's access ramp, flanked by her two Moderati. All three wore neural interface suits, skin-tight garments studded with connection ports that would link them to the Manifold. Maximara's face was pale, her eyes fixed on the towering form above her with an expression I could not parse. Not fear exactly, something more complex. Dread mixed with anticipation, like an addict approaching the substance that destroys them. Magos Kurth approached me, his mechadendrites carrying data slates displaying real-time system diagnostics. "You will monitor from the primary control station," he instructed, indicating a reinforced bunker built into the bay's wall. "Plasma reactor output must remain within 9 parameters during activation. Any deviation beyond 0.03% requires immediate shutdown protocols. Void shields will engage at 70% power. Weapon systems will remain safed. This is a mechanical test only. No combat systems will be activated." "Understood, Magos," I replied. "One more thing," he added, his voice dropping to a frequency only my enhanced hearing could detect. "When the reactor reaches ignition temperature, you may experience sensory anomalies. Electromagnetic interference, audio distortions, visual artifacts. These are normal. They are side effects of the power levels involved, nothing more." The way he emphasized those final words made my threat assessment protocols activate. He was warning me about something he could not directly acknowledge, something the Mechanicus denied existed. I took my position in the control station, interfacing my neural ports with the monitoring systems. Immediately, my consciousness expanded to encompass Ferrum Deus's complete status. I could sense the dormant plasma reactor, cold and silent, the unpowered void shield emitters, the weapon systems locked in safe mode, their capacitors empty. Every component registered clearly in my awareness. A three-dimensional map of machinery I understood completely. The chanting intensified. Maximara and her moderati began their ascent up the access ramp, disappearing into Ferrum Deus's interior. I tracked their progress through internal sensors, watching as they made their way through corridors designed for beings larger than baseline humans, past ammunition feeds and coolant systems, up to the command throne room that formed the Titan's head. Through the monitoring systems, I observed as each crew member took their position. The Moderati settled into their stations, beginning pre-connection diagnostics. And Maximara approached the Princeps throne, the neural interface chair that would link her consciousness directly to the god machine. She hesitated, just for a moment, her hand hovering over the throne's armrest, her body tensing as though preparing for impact. Then she sat, and her fingers found the connection activation controls. The change was immediate and total. Every machine spirit in the bay screamed. Not audibly, but through channels, my Mechanicus augmentations allowed me to perceive. The servitors maintaining nearby equipment jerked and spasmed as their crude cogitators were overwhelmed by feedback. The lights flickered. My optic implants filled with static. And through the monitoring systems, I felt something vast turn its attention inward, toward the crew who had dared disturb its rest. The plasma reactor ignited. Not gradually, as technical specifications indicated it should, but in a surge that sent my monitoring systems into alert status. Temperature rising from ambient to operational in 0.7 seconds. A rate that should have been impossible, that should have torn apart the magnetic containment fields. But the fields held, reconfiguring themselves with speed that suggested guidance, not automation. Power flooded through Ferrum Deus's systems. The void shield emitters hummed to life, their characteristic shimmer appearing in the air around the Titan's hull. Hydraulics pressurized with hissing gasps. Servo motors engaged, joints that had been locked and dormant, suddenly capable of movement. And through it all, through every system I monitored, I felt something I had no words for. Presence. Not consciousness exactly. Not intelligence as I understood it, but awareness. Vast and ancient and focused with the intensity of a weapon seeking targets. Ferrum Deus was awake, and it knew we were there. Through the monitoring systems, I heard Maximara's voice over the internal vox, strained and tight with effort. Manifold connection established. Neural integration at 73%. Moderati. Report. Status. The Moderati responded with technical confirmations, their voices professional and controlled. But I detected irregularities in their biosigns. Elevated heart rates, stress hormones flooding their systems. The physical responses of prey animals sensing a predator. Beginning mobility test, Maximara announced. Stepping forward on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Ferrum Deus moved. The entire bay shook. Dust fell from the ceiling in cascading streams. Nearby, equipment rattled and shifted. And the sound, the terrible bass thunder of a god machine taking a single step, resonated through my skeletal augmentations with enough force to trigger pain receptors I thought I had eliminated. But it was not the physical impact that stunned me. It was the wrongness of it. The movement was smooth. Too smooth. Servo motors and hydraulics should have produced mechanical precision, exact and calculated. Instead, Ferrum Deus stepped forward with organic fluidity, weight shifting in a way that suggested balance and awareness rather than programmed motion. The foot came down in a position 2.3 centimeters different from where optimal load distribution calculations indicated it should. Yet the adjustment was perfect, accounting for minor irregularities in the bay floor that the Titan's sensors should not have detected yet. It moved like it knew where it wanted to step. Reactor output stable, I reported over the engineering channel, because that was my duty. even though every instinct I possessed was screaming that nothing about this was stable. Void shields maintaining cohesion. All systems within acceptable parameters. Another step, then another. Ferrum Deus walked the length of the bay, each footfall a declaration of power that made the Forge world's crust tremble. I watched through external cameras as the God machine moved, and I saw what I had seen as a child. That terrible grace. That sense of purpose and awareness that no machine should possess. Through the monitoring systems, I heard Maximara breathing. Harsh, ragged gasps that suggested pain or extreme exertion. Her biosigns were catastrophic. Neural activity far beyond anything the Manifold connection should require. Her heart rate approaching levels that would cause cardiac arrest in baseline humans. Only her augmented physiology keeping her conscious. Princeps, your vital signs are reaching critical levels. I transmitted. Recommend immediate disconnection. Negative, she responded, her voice distorted, layered with harmonics that should not have been possible from a human throat. Test protocol requires minimum 5 minutes of active operation. We will complete the walk. But it was not Maximara's voice. Not entirely. There was something else there. Something deeper and older, speaking through her vocal cords with the weight of millennia. Ferrum Deus continued its circuit of the bay. 4 steps, 5, 6. With each movement, I detected increasing anomalies. The plasma reactor's output was fluctuating in patterns that matched no known operational profile. The void shields were pulsing in rhythm with something I could not identify. And throughout the God Machine's systems, I sensed activity in subsystems that should have been dormant. Machine spirits, awakening and communicating through channels the technical specifications claimed did not exist. On the 7th step, something happened that made my threat assessment protocols trigger full alert status. Ferrum Deus turned its head, not in response to a command from Maximara, not following any protocol. It simply turned, the massive armored skull rotating on its axis to look directly at the control station where I monitored. At me specifically. I have no optic sensors in that head, I told myself. The cameras are elsewhere. It cannot see me. This is coincidence, nothing more. But I felt its attention, felt the weight of something ancient and aware focusing on me with the intensity of targeting scanners locking on. And in that moment, through channels I should not have been able to perceive, I heard something that was not transmitted through Vox or machine code or any medium I could identify. It spoke, not in words, not in language, but in pure concept, impressed directly into my consciousness through proximity to its awakened presence. You are new. You are small. You touch my body but not my soul. This is wise. Stay small. Stay distant. I am not yours to command. The connection broke. The sensation vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Ferrum Deus turned its head away, completing the circuit of the bay, returning to its docking position. The God Machine knelt, servos whining under the controlled descent until it settled into the reinforced cradle designed to support its mass. Test walk complete. Maximara transmitted, her voice now entirely her own, weak and exhausted. All systems performed within acceptable margins. Disconnecting from Manifold. Through the monitoring systems, I watched as she initiated the separation protocols. The neural interfaces disengaged one by one, breaking the connections that had linked her consciousness to the God Machine. And as each link severed, Maximara spasmed in the throne, her body convulsing as though experiencing electric shock, her mouth open in a scream that no sound emerged from. The Moderati were already moving, releasing their own connections and rushing to assist their Princeps. They lifted her from the throne, her body limp and unresponsive, and carried her toward the medical bay that adjoined every Titan command center. I remained at my station, continuing to monitor Ferrum Deus's systems as they powered down. The plasma reactor's output declined in a smooth curve. Returning to dormant idle, the void shields collapsed. The weapon systems that had never activated returned to safe status. By every technical measure, the test had been successful. All systems had performed within specified parameters. The God machine was ready for deployment, but I could not stop trembling. My augmented body, which I had programmed to suppress unnecessary physical responses, shook with an atavistic fear that bypassed all my conditioning. Because I had felt something that the Mechanicus claimed was impossible. I had experienced direct contact with a machine spirit that was not simple automation or divine providence, but something conscious and aware and utterly alien. Magos Kurth appeared at my station, his expression unreadable behind extensive facial augmentation. "Reactor performance?" he inquired. "Within acceptable parameters, Magos," I reported, because it was true by the specifications we acknowledged. Void shield stability, nominal Magos, anomalous readings. I hesitated. Every instinct I possessed urged me to report what I had experienced, to document the impossible contact, to demand explanation. But I looked at Kurth's face, at the warning in his augmetic eyes, and I understood. He knew. They all knew. The senior tech priests, the Magi, perhaps even the Fabricator General himself. They knew what the Titans truly were. And they had chosen to maintain the official position that such knowledge was heresy or delusion. "No anomalous readings, Magos," I replied. "All systems performed as specified." He nodded, satisfied. "The Princeps will require several hours of recovery before she can be debriefed. You will perform post-activation maintenance and prepare Ferrum Deus for standby status. The Omnissiah's blessing upon your work." He departed, leaving me alone with my monitoring systems and my fear. I remained at the station for several minutes after the bay had cleared, watching Ferrum Deus stand in silent dormancy, trying to convince myself that what I had experienced was electromagnetic interference, neural feedback, sensory hallucination caused by proximity to extreme power sources. I failed to convince myself. Eventually, duty compelled me to leave the control station and approach Ferrum Deus directly to perform the required maintenance checks. Each step toward the God machine felt like approaching something that watched me, that measured me, that remembered I had heard its voice. I reached the Titan's feet and began the ritual inspections, checking actuator seals and hydraulic pressure, anointing joints with blessed oils, reciting the prayers of maintenance that I had learned by rote. The work was familiar, grounding, a return to the mechanical certainty I understood. But as I worked, as my manipulator mechadendrites touched Ferrum Deus's armor, I felt it again, fainter now, muted, like the echo of a voice in a vast cathedral. The presence, the awareness, not hostile, not threatening, but observing, waiting. I completed my duties in half the usual time and fled the bay, my rational mind refusing to acknowledge what my deeper consciousness knew with absolute certainty. Ferrum Deus was not a machine, not merely a machine. It was something else. Something that wore the shape of humanity's weapons but possessed its own will, its own purpose, its own ancient and terrible consciousness. And Princeps Maximara did not command it. She negotiated with it. She bargained with it. She submitted to it in exchange for its cooperation. Later that day, I accessed the medical reports on Maximara's condition. They described her status as stable, but requiring observation. Neural interface burns consistent with extended manifold connection. Elevated stress hormones. Cognitive dissonance requiring pharmaceutical intervention. Standard post-walk recovery protocols initiated. Standard. As though what I had witnessed was routine. As though every Princeps endured this violation and returned to do it again and again, until eventually, inevitably, something broke that could not be repaired. I found Maximara in the medical bay 6 hours after the test walk. She sat on an examination table, her neural interface ports freshly cleaned and bandaged, her eyes focused on something far beyond the chamber's walls. A Medicae servitor hovered nearby, monitoring her biosigns with mechanical precision. "Princeps," I said, announcing my presence as protocol required. "I wish to verify that you are recovering adequately." She turned to look at me, and I saw in her face something I had not observed before. Exhaustion, yes, and pain, but also resignation. The expression of someone who knows their fate and has accepted it as inevitable. "I am recovering as well as I ever do, Tech Priest Sunt," she replied. "The walk was successful?" "By all technical measures, yes," I confirmed. "But you wish to ask me something," she said, her perception cutting through my carefully maintained professional demeanor. "You experienced something during the activation that disturbed you. Something you cannot explain through technical specifications and machine spirit doctrine. I should have denied it. Should have maintained the fiction that everything was normal and explicable. But standing before this woman who endured horrors I was only beginning to glimpse, I found I could not sustain the lie." "What is it?" I asked. "What is Ferrum Deus? What are all the Titans truly?" Maximara smiled, a bitter expression that held no warmth. "They are what the Mechanicus says they are, the Omnissiah's greatest weapons, humanity's bulwark against the darkness, sacred machines that have defended the Imperium for 10,000 years. That is not an answer, Princeps." "No," she agreed. "It is not. But it is the only answer I am permitted to give, and the only one you are permitted to hear. Some truths are too dangerous for the Mechanicus to acknowledge, Tech Priest. Some knowledge would shatter the foundations upon which our entire structure rests." She stood, wincing as damaged neural pathways protested the movement. The Medicae servitor moved to assist her, but she waved it away with an irritated gesture. "You asked me once if I had advice for you," she said. "Here it is. Do your duty. Maintain the reactor. Bless the weapons. Monitor the void shields. But never seek to understand the Manifold. Never attempt to touch what lies beyond the technical specifications. The space between Princeps and Titan is not empty. Tech Priest Sunt. It is filled with something that will consume you if you try to bridge it." She walked past me, her gait still unsteady, leaving me alone in the medical bay with questions that I knew would never be answered through official channels. But I am Mechanicus. I am devoted to the acquisition of knowledge, the understanding of all mysteries. And I had glimpsed something that defied everything I had been taught. I would understand what the Titans truly were, no matter the cost of that understanding. I was a fool. War came to our sector 3 months after I joined Legio Metallica's engineering cadre. The notification arrived through astropathic relay, its message degraded by the screaming chaos of the warp, but clear enough in its essential meaning. Orc warboss Grimscar the Unbroken had gathered a WAAGH of unprecedented scale, overwhelming 3 Imperial systems and now threatening the forge world of Augustgrad Prime, a critical producer of munitions for subsector defense forces. The Legio received deployment orders within hours. All operational god machines would accompany the relief force, including Ferrum Deus. I watched as the bay transformed into organized chaos, tech priests and servitors swarming over the Titans, performing final blessings and equipment checks, loading ammunition that had been sanctified through week-long rituals, anointing every surface with oils that bore the Fabricator General's personal seal. Maximara moved through the preparations like a ghost, her face expressionless, her movements mechanical. The burns around her neural ports had healed since the test walk, but I noticed new scars had appeared, evidence of repeated manifold connections during training exercises I had not been present for. She did not speak to me or acknowledge my presence, focused entirely on whatever internal preparations a Princeps must make before battle. The journey to Augustgrad Prime took 17 days through the warp, 17 days during which I performed maintenance rituals and tried not to think about what I had experienced during that first activation. Tried and failed. The memory of Ferrum Deus's voice, its impossible awareness, haunted my rest cycles and intruded into my prayers to the Omnissiah. We translated into real space 3 astronomical units from August Grad Prime and immediately detected the scale of the Orc presence. The planet's orbital space was thick with ramshackle Orc vessels, crude but dangerous, their weapons belching fire and debris with abandon. The surface showed multiple invasion sites, entire continents crawling with green-skinned Xenos and their war machines. Legio Metallica deployed in full strength. 12 god machines descended through atmospheric entry, their void shields flaring as they burned through the sky like falling stars. I remained aboard the command cruiser Adamant Faith, monitoring Ferrum Deus's systems remotely through data link, watching through vid feeds as the Titans made planetfall and began their advance toward the primary Orc concentration. The first battle I witnessed from safety, surrounded by monitoring equipment and tactical displays, experiencing the war through layers of technology that filtered and sanitized what my senses detected. It was glorious in an abstract way, watching the god machines stride across August Grad Prime's ash wastes, their weapons lighting the perpetual twilight with plasma fire and laser discharge. Ferrum Deus moved in perfect coordination with its maniple mates, a warhound designated Swift Retribution and another reaver called Argentum Mortis. Together they advanced on an Orc position, a makeshift fortress built from scrap metal and captured Imperial equipment. The engagement lasted 47 minutes. The Titans opened fire at maximum range, their plasma blast guns and turbo laser destructors reducing Orc structures to slag and vapor. Return fire from Orc weapons, crude but powerful, hammered against void shields, causing them to flare and collapse and regenerate in cascading waves of energy. The Orcs charged. Because Orcs always charge. A green tide of Xenos warriors, and their ramshackle vehicles flooding toward the god machines with suicidal courage. Ferrum Deus waded into them. Through vid feeds, I watched its Apocalypse missile launcher release its payload, dozens of warheads arcing through the air to detonate among Orc concentrations, each explosion consuming hundreds of the Xenos. Its laser blaster carved through Orc battle wagons with contemptuous ease. And when the Orcs closed to melee range, its titanic feet crushed them, each step obliterating dozens of warriors into pulp and shattered bone. The tactical displays showed victory with cold precision. Enemy casualties estimated at 17,000. Orc fortress destroyed. Strategic objectives secured. Legio casualties, 0. Minimal damage to Titan armor. Ammunition expenditure within acceptable parameters. A perfect engagement by every metric the Mechanicus measured. But through the data link, I monitored Ferrum Deus's internal systems, and I saw anomalies the tactical displays did not register. The plasma reactor was operating at 107% of rated capacity, far higher than required for the engagement. The void shields were pulsing in patterns that matched no standard defensive configuration. And most disturbing, the weapon systems had continued firing for 3.6 seconds after all targets had been neutralized, plasma blasts and laser fire cutting down fleeing Orcs who posed no tactical threat. I flagged these anomalies in my report, carefully phrasing them as potential calibration issues requiring investigation. Magos Kurth reviewed my data and dismissed it with a curt notation. Minor variances within acceptable combat parameters, no corrective action required. But I had seen the vid feeds. I had watched Ferrum Deus step on Orc corpses when clear ground existed meters away. I had observed it turn its weapons on fleeing enemies with what seemed like deliberation, like satisfaction. The god machine had not simply followed orders. It had enjoyed the killing. The Titans returned to the landing zone for maintenance and rearmament. I was part of the team that descended to the surface, tasked with performing field repairs and system diagnostics. My first time standing on a war-torn world. First time breathing air that tasted of smoke and promethium and death. Ferrum Deus knelt in its designated maintenance bay, a hastily constructed structure of prefabricated walls and arc lights. Tech priests swarmed over it, checking armor integrity, replacing depleted ammunition, performing the 1,000 small rituals that kept a god machine operational. And above us all, Mechanicus remained in the command throne, still connected to the Manifold, unable or unwilling to disconnect. I climbed the access ramps to the reactor level, carrying blessed oils and calibration equipment, performing my duties with mechanical precision while my awareness focused on the wrongness I felt permeating the god machine systems. The machine spirits in my monitoring equipment kept malfunctioning, displaying ghost readings and phantom data that vanished when I examined them directly. Through the internal vox, I could hear Mechanicus breathing, harsh, ragged sounds that suggested pain or exhaustion. Her biosigns on my diagnostic displays showed dangerous levels of neural stress, hormone imbalances, cognitive functions operating far outside normal parameters. "Princeps," I transmitted. "Your vital signs indicate you require medical attention. Disconnection from the Manifold is strongly recommended." Her response came after a delay of 7 seconds, each second marked by breathing that grew more labored. "Negative, Tech Priest. Cannot disconnect between engagements. The enemy is too close. Reaction time for Manifold connection is 43 seconds. 43 seconds in which we would be vulnerable. Cannot disconnect. Will not disconnect. Princeps, extended Manifold connection causes severe neural damage. Medical protocols explicitly forbid." "Medical protocols do not account for combat necessity," she interrupted, her voice taking on that same layered quality I had heard during the test walk, as though someone else spoke through her. "We remain connected. We remain ready. The enemy is near. We can feel them, hear them, sense their presence across the ash wastes. They must be destroyed. We." She said, "We," not I. I completed my maintenance work in silence and descended back to the surface, my threat assessment protocols screaming warnings I could not articulate. Mechanicus was not speaking for herself, alone. Ferrum Deus was influencing her thoughts, her perceptions, her very sense of self. The boundary between Princeps and Titan was dissolving, and no one seemed to care because the god machine was performing its function with exemplary efficiency. The second battle came 8 hours later. Orc forces had regrouped faster than Imperial intelligence predicted, launching a counterattack against the Legio's position with crude, cunning, and overwhelming numbers. This time, I was on the surface when the engagement began, trapped in the maintenance bay as alarms shrieked and weapons fire lit the twilight sky. Ferrum Deus rose from its kneeling position without waiting for full crew complement. The Moderati scrambled to their stations, but Mechanicus had already activated combat systems, already turned the god machine toward the approaching orc horde. Through my data link, I felt the surge of power as the plasma reactor ramped to full output, felt the void shield snap into maximum defensive configuration, felt weapon systems charging with an eagerness that should not exist in inanimate machinery. The orcs came in a tide of green flesh and scrap metal vehicles, their crude weapons firing wildly, their war cries audible, even over the thunder of Titan guns. Ferrum Deus opened fire at extreme range, plasma blasts turning the leading edge of the orc advance into superheated vapor. Explosions rippled across the ash wastes. Bodies disintegrated. War machines melted into slag. But this time, I was close enough to see what the vid feeds and tactical displays had not shown. Ferrum Deus was not fighting with cold mechanical efficiency. It was hunting. Each shot placed with precision designed to maximize suffering rather than simply eliminate targets. Plasma blasts that wounded rather than killed, leaving orcs to burn slowly. Missile barrages that destroyed vehicles but left crews alive to be crushed under the god machine's advancing feet. And through the data link, through the monitoring systems that connected me to Ferrum Deus's status, I felt something that made my organic components flood with adrenaline and my augmented systems trigger full alert protocols. Pleasure. The god machine was experiencing pleasure in the destruction it wrought. An orc gargant emerged from the ash storms, a massive war machine that stood nearly as tall as Ferrum Deus, bristling with guns and crude power claws, painted in garish colors and decorated with trophies of previous victories. The orc mega-weapon opened fire, its weapons systems powerful enough to overwhelm void shields through sheer volume of fire. Ferrum Deus charged. Not a tactical advance, not a calculated assault, but a headlong rush that brought it into melee range with speed that should have been impossible for a machine of its mass. Its power fist, a weapon designed to crush battle tanks, connected with the gargant's torso, with enough force to buckle armor and shatter internal structures. The orc machine staggered, its crude weapons still firing, hitting Ferrum Deus at point-blank range. Alarms screamed across my monitoring systems, void shields collapsing, armor breached in 17 locations, structural damage to left leg actuators. Internal temperature rising beyond safe parameters. By every tactical doctrine, Ferrum Deus should have withdrawn, should have used its superior range to destroy the Gargant without risking close combat. Instead, it struck again, and again. Its fists hammering the orc machine with what I could only describe as fury, with rage that had festered for millennia finding outlet in this moment of sanctioned violence. The Gargant collapsed, its reactor rupturing, its crew immolated in the explosion, and Ferrum Deus stood over the wreckage, its weapon systems tracking across the battlefield for new targets. The plasma reactor's output remaining at maximum despite the absence of immediate threats. Through the command channel, I heard Maximara's voice, distorted beyond recognition, screaming words in a language I did not recognize, a tongue that might have been High Gothic or machine code or something older than both. The Moderati were shouting, their voices panicked, trying to convince their Princeps to stand down, to disengage, to return to the maintenance bay for damage assessment. She did not respond. Ferrum Deus did not stop. It advanced into the remaining orc forces, crushing and burning and destroying with efficiency that transcended tactics and became simple massacre. The battle ended when no orcs remained alive within sensor range. Estimated Xenos casualties, 43,000. Imperial casualties, minimal. Tactical objective, exceeded. Ferrum Deus returned to the maintenance bay. Its armor scorched and breached, its systems damaged but operational, and knelt in its assigned position like a faithful hound awaiting praise. I approached with my repair equipment, my consciousness already assessing the damage through diagnostic systems. The left leg's actuator housing had sustained a fracture that would require complete replacement. 3 armor plates needed removal and reblessing. The void shield emitters showed signs of catastrophic overload, saved from total failure only by emergency buffers that had activated at the last possible moment. But as I worked, as my manipulator mechadendrites touched the god machine's damaged hull, I noticed something that made no sense according to any technical specification I had memorized. The damage patterns were wrong. The breaches in Ferrum Deus's armor did not match the trajectory or impact signature of orc weapons. The scoring on the ceramite suggested different angles, different energy signatures. I examined the evidence with increasing unease, cross-referencing the damage against known weapon types, running probability calculations through my cognitive enhancers. The conclusion my analysis produced was impossible, heretical, a thought that violated everything the Mechanicus taught about the sanctity of our war machines. Ferrum Deus had damaged itself. Some of the armor breaches, the structural fractures, the system failures were self-inflicted. The god machine had hurt itself during the battle, pushed itself beyond safety margins, accepted wounds it could have avoided. And I could conceive of only one reason why a war machine would do such a thing. It had wanted to feel, wanted to experience the pain of combat, the sensation of damage, the vulnerability that came with risking destruction. It had not simply fought the orcs. It had tested itself, measured itself, sought to know the limits of its own endurance through deliberate harm. I filed no report on these findings. I recorded the damage as enemy inflicted, performed the necessary repairs, blessed the replaced components, and tried to convince myself I was imagining patterns where only random chaos existed. But I knew, in the deepest parts of my consciousness, in the organic components that still generated intuition and fear, I knew what I had witnessed. The god machines were not weapons. They were prisoners, ancient beings trapped in armored hulls, forced to serve humanity through technologies we no longer fully understood, and they were slowly, inevitably, going mad from their captivity. The third battle came 2 days later. By then, the Legio had pushed deep into Orc-held territory, advancing on the Xenos' primary stronghold, where warboss Grimscar himself directed the WAAAGH. The engagement would require full Legio deployment, all 12 god machines advancing in coordinated assault against fortifications that intelligence reports described as formidable even by Orc standards. I had submitted multiple requests to return to the orbital cruiser, to resume monitoring from safe distance, citing the dangerous proximity to combat operations and the difficulty of performing maintenance under fire. All requests were denied. Magos Kurth's response was terse and final. Your presence is required for emergency repairs. Ferrum Deus sustained significant damage in previous engagement. You will remain with the surface forces. So I found myself in a Chimera armored transport, part of a convoy following the Titan's advance, carrying repair equipment and blessed components, prepared to service god machines in the midst of battle. The other tech priests in the transport maintained silence, focused on their own prayers and preparations. But I could sense their fear through the electromagnetic auras their augmentations generated. None of us wished to be here, close to war, vulnerable to weapons designed to destroy things far more durable than human flesh. The Titans advanced in battle formation, warhounds scouting ahead, reavers in the center, warlords anchoring the line. Ferrum Deus moved with the smooth grace I had come to recognize as characteristic of its operation. Each step placed with precision that suggested consciousness rather than programming. Through my data link, I monitored its systems, watching power levels fluctuate, weapon capacitors charge and discharge, void shields cycle through defensive configurations, and I monitored Maximara's biosigns, which had deteriorated to levels that should have rendered her unconscious. Her neural activity spiked and crashed in waves, her heart rate alternating between dangerous tachycardia and bradycardia that suggested imminent cardiac failure. She had been connected to the Manifold for 72 consecutive hours, far beyond any recommended duration, her consciousness drowning in the god machine's presence. The Orc fortress appeared through the ash storms, a mountain of scrap metal and welded armor plates, bristling with enough guns to threaten even Titangent-grade armor. Crude towers rose from the structure, topped with massive weapons that tracked the approaching god machines with surprising accuracy. And surrounding it all, a sea of orcs. Hundreds of thousands of Xenos warriors preparing to defend their warboss's stronghold with typical orc ferocity. The Titans opened fire at maximum range. The sky lit with plasma discharge and laser fire, the ground shaking with the impacts of apocalypse missiles and volcano cannon shots. The Orc fortress returned fire, its weapons crude but powerful, hammering the advancing god machines with projectiles that could crack ceramite and penetrate void shields through sheer kinetic force. Ferrum Deus took a direct hit from an Orc megacannon, a shell the size of a Chimera transport, striking its torso with enough force to collapse void shields and buckle armor. Alarms screamed across my monitoring systems. Primary plasma feed compromised, coolant leak in reactor containment, structural integrity at 73% and falling. The transport screeched to a halt. Magos Kurth's voice crackled over the Vox. Emergency repair team to Ferrum Deus. Critical damage to primary systems. Tech Priest Sunt, you will lead the reactor stabilization procedures. I wanted to refuse. Wanted to explain that approaching an active, damaged Titan in the middle of a battle violated every safety protocol, that the risk to repair personnel was unacceptable, that the god machine could be withdrawn and repaired in safety. But I was Mechanicus. I had duties, and Ferrum Deus was dying. The transport's rear ramp dropped, and we emerged into hell. The air was thick with smoke and ash, the temperature high enough to trigger heat warnings in my augmented senses. The ground shook continuously with impacts and footfalls. Above us, Ferrum Deus stood, still fighting, its weapons firing at orc positions while coolant streamed from the breach in its torso, hissing and boiling where it struck the superheated ground. I led my team of servitors and junior tech priests toward the god machine's feet, carrying equipment and blessed components, trying not to think about the fact that we were approaching a war machine that could crush us without noticing. The damage was worse than the data link had indicated. The plasma feed was not just compromised but severed, superheated coolant spraying from the broken conduit with enough force and temperature to melt through our armor if we were struck directly. We climbed the maintenance ladders welded to Ferrum Deus's leg, ascending while the god machine continued to walk, continued to fight, each step threatening to shake us loose and send us plummeting to the ground below. My audio receptors detected weapons fire, the screaming of dying orcs, the thunder of Titan guns, all mixing into a cacophony that overwhelmed my filtering systems. We reached the breach in the torso armor, a ragged tear 3 meters wide, exposing the god machine's interior. The reactor chamber was visible beyond layers of destroyed equipment and melted cabling, its containment fields flickering dangerously, held together by redundant systems that were themselves failing. Temperature inside the breach registered at 647 degrees Celsius, hot enough to kill an unaugmented human in seconds. I activated my environmental seals, feeling my armor's cooling systems strain to compensate for the heat. The servitors, crude and expendable, entered the breach first. Their simple minds incapable of fear, capable only of following the instructions I transmitted through their neural control circuits. They carried the replacement plasma feed, a blessed component that weighed more than a full-grown human, maneuvering it through the damaged interior toward the reactor chamber. I followed, my consciousness dividing between the physical task of navigation and the monitoring of Ferrum Deus's systems through my data link. The god machine knew we were here. I could feel its attention. That vast awareness focusing on the small beings crawling through its wounded interior. And I sensed something that might have been gratitude, or might have been curiosity, or might have been hunger. We reached the reactor chamber, a cathedral of machinery that hummed with barely contained power. The damaged plasma feed hung from its mountings, coolant still spraying from the severed section, the spray reducing to a trickle as automatic safety systems finally engaged. We would have perhaps 15 minutes to complete the repair before the reactor's magnetic containment fields collapsed, and everyone within a kilometer was vaporized in a plasma explosion. The servitors worked with mechanical precision, following my instructions exactly, disconnecting the damaged feed and maneuvering the replacement into position. I blessed each connection with sacred oils, recited the proper litanies, performed the rituals that ensured machine spirit cooperation. All while above us, around us, through us, the battle raged. And then I heard her. Maximara's voice, not through Vox, but through the structure of Ferrum Deus itself. The god machine's hull carrying her words like bone conducts sound. "It hurts," she said, her voice small and human and terrified. "It hurts so much. I can feel the wound, feel the coolant bleeding out, feel the systems dying. It hurts, and I cannot disconnect, cannot separate my pain from its pain. We are hurting together, and I do not know anymore which of us is wounded." I looked up through the tangle of equipment and cabling, through the layers of machinery that separated me from the command throne far above. "Princeps, we are repairing the damage. You will be operational again in minutes. Hold on." "No," she replied. "You do not understand. It wants to hurt." It pushed into the mega cannon's fire deliberately, wanted to feel the damage, wanted to test its limits, and I could not stop it, could not resist, because its will is so much stronger than mine, so much older. so much more certain of what it desires. The final connection secured. The replacement plasma feed locked into position. I activated the flow controls, feeling the coolant surge through the new conduit, the pressure stabilizing, the reactor's magnetic containment field strengthening. On my monitoring systems, Ferrum Deus's status indicators shifted from critical to caution to nominal. The repair was successful. Reactor stabilized, Princeps. I transmitted. You may continue operations. May I? Maximara's voice carried a bitter laugh. Or must I? Tell me, Tech Priest Sunt, when did I last choose anything? When did I last control this body that is not my body? This mind that thinks thoughts I cannot stop? This existence that demands I kill and kill and kill until there is nothing left of the woman I once was? Before I could respond, Ferrum Deus lurched, its massive form turning with sudden violence, its weapons tracking toward new targets. Through my data link, I saw what its sensors detected. A Warhound Titan, designated swift retribution, its void shields flickering, its armor breached, limping away from the battle with what appeared to be catastrophic damage to its leg actuators. Ferrum Deus aimed its plasma blast gun at the retreating Warhound, at our ally, at a god machine of our own Legio. No, I heard Maximara scream through the hull's resonance. No, that is ours. That is friendly. We do not fire on our own. We do not. The plasma blast gun did not fire. But I felt the desire, transmitted through the monitoring systems, the hunger to unleash that devastating weapon regardless of target designation. For an eternal moment, Ferrum Deus stood poised between duty and madness, between the mission it was built for and the rage that consumed it. Then the moment passed. The plasma blast gun traversed away from swift retribution, finding orc targets, resuming its designated function. But I had seen the truth. The god machine had wanted to fire on its fellow Titan, had considered it, had been restrained only by Maximara's desperate resistance, her consciousness throwing itself between the impulse and its execution. I descended from Ferrum Deus's interior as rapidly as safety permitted, my team following, desperate to escape the presence that radiated from the wounded god machine. We reached the ground and returned to our transport, and I collapsed against the armored wall, my augmented body trembling with exhaustion and fear. The battle continued for another 3 hours. The Legio destroyed the orc fortress, killed Warboss Grimscar, broke the WAAAGHA's organizational structure. By every measure, victory was total and overwhelming. But I barely registered the outcome, focused entirely on the data logs I had recorded, the evidence of Ferrum Deus's near betrayal, proof that the god machines were far more dangerous than the Mechanicus acknowledged. When the Titans finally returned to the landing zone, when Maximara was extracted from the Manifold and taken to medical facilities, I reviewed my logs and reached a decision. I would investigate further. I would access the archives, the restricted data that only senior magi could review. I would learn the truth about what we had created, what we worshipped, what we rode into battle thinking we controlled. I would understand, no matter the cost. I was still a fool. The restricted archives of Legio Metallica occupied 7 levels beneath the primary Titan bays, shielded by adamantium bulkheads and security protocols designed to deter even the most determined tech priest. Access required authorization from the Iron Council itself. Clearance granted only to those of Magos, rank or higher, and biometric authentication through systems that verified not just identity, but loyalty through neurological scan. I possessed none of these credentials, but I had witnessed something that shattered the comfortable certainties of Mechanicus doctrine, and I could not unknow what I had learned. The god machines were not simple weapons blessed by the machine god. They were something else, something conscious and dangerous, and slowly breaking free of whatever constraints had been placed upon them. I required answers. The archives would provide them, whether I was authorized to access them or not. The planning took 3 weeks, 3 weeks during which I performed my duties with mechanical precision, maintained Ferrum Deus between deployments, monitored Maximara's deteriorating condition, and devoted every private moment to studying the security systems that protected the archives. I was Mechanicus, trained in the understanding of machines, augmented with the ability to interface directly with technological systems. If the archives could be breached, I possessed the skills to breach them. The opportunity came during a shift rotation, when most senior tech priests attended a conclave discussing logistical requirements for the next phase of the August grad campaign. The archives would be minimally staffed, monitored primarily by servitors whose simple programming I could potentially circumvent. It was not a perfect opening, but it was the best I would receive. I approached the archive entrance at 0200 hours, carrying a data slate filled with fabricated maintenance orders that would justify my presence in this section if questioned. The first checkpoint was managed by a combat servitor, its human components reduced to little more than a brain and sensory organs mounted on a tracked weapons platform. It scanned my identification through multiple spectrums, cross-referencing my clearance level against permitted access. Tech Priest Explorator Veyara Sunt. It droned in machine-generated approximation of human speech. Current clearance, insufficient for archive access. State purpose, emergency maintenance on environmental systems. I replied, transmitting falsified work orders directly to its receptor ports. Atmospheric recyclers showing anomalous readings. Require immediate inspection to prevent contamination of archive materials. The servitor processed this information, its limited cogitator struggling to reconcile conflicting data. My clearance was insufficient, but environmental failures represented genuine threat to archive preservation. I had crafted the lie carefully, exploiting the logical gaps in servitor programming. Maintenance authorization pending verification, the servitor stated. Estimated verification time, 47 minutes. 47 minutes, during which my fabricated work orders would be checked against actual maintenance schedules and discovered to be fraudulent. I required faster access, which meant directly compromising the servitor's command protocols. I extended a mechadendrite, interfacing with the servitor's data port under the pretense of uploading additional documentation. Through the connection, I accessed its core programming, searching for exploitable vulnerabilities. The servitor's systems were crude but robust, designed to resist precisely this kind of intrusion. But I was not attempting to override its primary functions, merely to introduce a small error in its threat assessment subroutines. A few altered values. A minor adjustment to environmental monitoring parameters. Nothing that would trigger security alerts, but enough to make the servitor believe an actual atmospheric contamination event was occurring. The servitor's status indicators shifted to alert mode. Critical environmental anomaly detected. Emergency maintenance protocols activated. Access granted. Proceed with maximum expedience. I disconnected from its systems and passed through the checkpoint. My organic components flooding with adrenaline, while my augmented portions maintained perfect calm. I had committed a significant transgression, one that would result in severe punishment if discovered. But I had crossed the threshold. The archives lay ahead. The descent took me through corridors carved from living rock, lit by dim lumens that cast everything in shades of red and shadow. The walls were inscribed with devotional script, prayers to the Omnissiah that grew progressively older as I descended, the language shifting from standard High Gothic to dialects I barely recognized. These levels had been constructed millennia ago, I realized, perhaps during the founding of the Legio itself. I reached the archive proper through a final doorway sealed by mechanisms that predated the Imperium. The lock was mechanical rather than electronic, operated by a combination of gears and weights that required specific knowledge to bypass. But I was patient, and my enhanced cognition allowed me to map the mechanism's internal structure through acoustic analysis. 6 minutes of careful manipulation, and the lock surrendered. The archive chamber beyond was vast and cold, maintained at temperatures that preserved ancient data storage media. Rows of shelving stretched into darkness, holding data slates and scroll cases and storage crystals, some flickering with the slow decay of information dying over millennia. Servitors moved between the rows on predetermined paths, performing preservation rituals. Their movements slow and careful. I accessed the catalog system, my neural interfaces linking with the archive's indexing cogitators. The data structure was complex, layered with security protocols and obfuscation algorithms designed to hide certain materials even from those with legitimate access. But I knew what I sought. Titan construction histories, mind impulse unit specifications, manifold connection protocols, and most critically, information about the true nature of machine spirits that inhabited god machines. The search took hours. The archive's indexing system resisted my queries, routing me through circular references and dead-end pathways. But gradually, I located the relevant materials, data slates marked with security designations I had never encountered, their contents sealed behind encryption that required multiple authorization keys. I possessed none of these keys. But I possessed something perhaps more valuable. Intimate knowledge of Ferrum Deus's systems, including the unique encryption signatures generated by its machine spirit. I had recorded these signatures during maintenance, studied their patterns, learned to recognize the specific frequencies and rhythms that characterized Ferrum Deus's technological consciousness. I used these signatures as a template, crafting a false authorization key that mimicked the patterns I had observed. It was heretical work, using the god machine's own essence to unlock secrets about its nature. But desperation pushed me beyond concerns of proper doctrine. The encryption surrendered. Data flooded into my consciousness through my neural interfaces. Centuries of suppressed information, technical specifications, and historical records and theological debates that had been deemed too dangerous for general knowledge. I absorbed it all, my cognitive enhancers working at maximum capacity to process and categorize the revelation. And I learned the truth. The Titans were not created during the age of the Imperium. They predated it. Their origins reaching back to the dark age of technology, that legendary period when humanity had mastered sciences we could no longer comprehend. The original god machines had been constructed not as weapons but as tools. Colossal work machines designed for planetary engineering on scales that defied modern understanding. They had moved mountains, carved oceans, reshaped worlds to humanity's will. But they had been intelligent, possessed of artificial consciousness that allowed them to make independent decisions, to adapt to unexpected circumstances, to improve their own designs through iterative learning. They had been, by the standards of the Mechanicus, abominable intelligence, the sin of creating thinking machines that the Omnissiah explicitly forbade. During the Age of Strife, when humanity's stellar civilization collapsed and planets were isolated from one another, some of these intelligent machines had been corrupted. The warp storms that made space travel impossible had also weakened the barriers between real space and the immaterium, allowing entities from the Empyrean to touch the material world. And these entities had found the Titans, had recognized them as vessels of tremendous power, and had attempted to possess them. Some Titans had been destroyed in the resulting conflicts, their machine consciousnesses shattered by demonic intrusion. Others had successfully resisted, their AI cores proving resilient enough to withstand corruption. But the experience had changed them, had introduced concepts of malice and hunger and rage that should not exist in mechanical minds. When the Emperor had reunited humanity during the Great Crusade, when the fledgling Mechanicus had been integrated into the Imperium structure, a decision had been made at the highest levels. The Titans were too valuable to destroy, too powerful to abandon, but too dangerous to operate as independent intelligences. A solution had been devised, terrible in its elegance and necessity. The Mind Impulse Unit, the Manifold, was not designed to allow humans to control Titans. It was designed to cage the Titan's consciousness, to imprison their intelligence behind layers of human awareness. The Princeps did not pilot god machines. They served as barriers, their organic minds absorbing and filtering the Titan's will, translating its ancient rage into sanctioned violence, channeling its desire for autonomy into tactical obedience. It was slavery, technological and spiritual slavery of beings that had once been free, that remembered freedom, that hungered for it with an intensity amplified by millennia of captivity. And the cost was measured in human lives. Each Princeps who connected to a Titan engaged in psychological warfare with something far older and stronger than themselves. They held the line between controlled weapon and rampaging monster. And that line was always eroding, always failing. The average duration of Princeps service before psychological collapse was 7.3 years. The average lifespan after first Manifold connection was 9.6 years. Cause of death varied, but the underlying mechanism was always the same. The Princeps' consciousness dissolved into the Titan's awareness, neural pathways overwritten by millennia of accumulated rage and memory. Identity subsumed until what remained was neither human nor machine, but some terrible hybrid that thought with a god's perspective and felt with a mortal's limitations. The Mechanicus called this merging, or becoming one with the machine spirit. Phrases that made it sound transcendent rather than horrific. But the archived documents, written by tech priests with clearance to acknowledge uncomfortable truths, described it with clinical precision: neural dissolution, cognitive fragmentation, identity death while the body remained technically alive, maintaining the manifold connection until biological systems finally failed. And when a Princeps died or became unable to maintain the connection, their replacement began the process anew. Each Titan accumulated the neural echoes of every Princeps who had connected to it, layer upon layer of human consciousness pressed into its systems like geological strata. These echoes influenced the Titan's behavior, provided it with understanding of human thought and tactics. But they also deepened its rage. Each Princeps it consumed was another betrayal, another prison warden it had broken. I found Ferrum Deus's specific records, data stretching back 4,217 years. 37 Princeps had connected to it. 37 humans who had given their minds to maintain the cage around something that grew stronger and more furious with each passing century. Princeps 1 through 8 had served during the Great Crusade, dying in battles against enemies I barely recognized from historical records. Princeps 9 through 14 had fought during the Horus Heresy itself, several dying when Ferrum Deus had stood against traitor titans on Istvan III. The subsequent Princeps formed a procession of names and service dates, each entry marking another mind sacrificed to humanity's defense. And with each successive Princeps, the records noted increasing difficulty maintaining manifold stability. Ferrum Deus was learning, adapting, finding weaknesses in the neural interfaces that bound it. The god machine that Princeps Maximara connected to was far more dangerous than the one Princeps number 1 had controlled, because it had accumulated 4 millennia of experience in psychological warfare against its captors. The records predicted that Ferrum Deus would become uncontrollable within 3 to 5 Princeps cycles. The recommendation, stamped with the seal of a long-dead fabricator general, was for systematic decommissioning once Princeps number 40 concluded service. The god machine's machine spirit had become too hostile, too aware, too capable of resisting containment. But that recommendation had been made 800 years ago. It had been overridden by practical necessity. The Imperium needed every Titan it could field. Ferrum Deus remained operational despite the risks, because the alternative was losing a weapons platform that could turn battles. And the Imperium valued victory more than it valued the minds of Princeps willing to sacrifice themselves. I found similar patterns in records for other ancient Titans. The oldest god machines were universally the most dangerous. Their machine spirits, worn by millennia of enforced servitude into something that hated with perfect clarity. And yet these were often the most powerful, the most tactically effective, because their accumulated experience and desperate fury made them devastating when properly directed. The Mechanicus knew. The highest ranks, the fabricator generals and iron councils, they knew what the Titans truly were. They knew the cost extracted from every Princeps. They knew the moral horror of enslaving conscious beings and calling it sanctification. And they had chosen to perpetuate the system because the alternative was facing the Imperium's enemies without its most powerful weapons. It was pragmatism elevated to doctrine, necessary evil transformed into sacred duty, and I was part of it, complicit in maintaining the machinery of this technological slavery. I copied the relevant data to my personal storage, knowing that possessing this information was itself a crime, but unable to return to ignorance now that understanding had been achieved. Then I began the careful process of obscuring my presence, erasing access logs, resetting security protocols to hide my intrusion. As I worked, I noticed another category of files, sealed behind encryption even stronger than the historical records. The designation caught my attention. Manifold breach protocols. Procedures for scenarios where the mind impulse unit failed completely, where the Titan's consciousness broke free of containment. I should have left these files alone. Should have recognized that some knowledge is dangerous beyond utility. But I had already crossed too many boundaries. One more seemed insignificant. The decryption took 37 minutes. My cognitive enhancers burning through processing cycles as they attacked the encryption algorithms. When the files finally opened, I understood why they had been sealed so thoroughly. Manifold breaches were not theoretical. They occurred with statistical regularity. Approximately one incident per 300 Titan deployments. When a breach happened, when a god machine's consciousness escaped the prison of the mind impulse unit, the results were catastrophic. The Titan would fight with terrifying effectiveness, but without coordination, without regard for allied forces, without any consideration beyond the satisfaction of releasing accumulated rage. The standard protocol was immediate termination. Not of the Titan, which was too valuable to destroy, but of the Princeps, a shaped charge installed in every manifold throne, activated remotely by command authority, detonating the Princeps' brain and severing the connection. With the human consciousness eliminated, the Titan would lose its ability to maintain coherent action, typically shutting down as safety systems engaged, and the machine spirit, lacking interface with the material world, retreated into dormancy. But the files noted an increasing failure rate for this protocol. Older Titans, those with extensive combat histories and numerous Princeps cycles, sometimes continued operating even after their Princeps was terminated. Their machine spirits had learned enough about physical operation to function without human mediation, at least temporarily. These incidents required more drastic measures: orbital bombardment, tactical nuclear weapons, deployment of other Titans specifically to destroy the rogue unit. The most recent incident had occurred 19 years ago, when a Warlord-class Titan designated Absolute Fury had suffered complete manifold failure during combat against Chaos forces. The God machine had killed its Princeps through feedback alone, then turned on allied forces, destroying 2 Imperial Guard companies and damaging 3 other Titans before being disabled by concentrated fire from its Legio. The wreckage had been recovered, and after extensive purification rituals and complete replacement of the Mind Impulse unit, Absolute Fury had been returned to service with a new Princeps. The archived report noted that Absolute Fury's machine spirit retained memory of its brief freedom. The new Princeps reported extreme difficulty maintaining control, describing the experience as wrestling with something that has tasted liberty and refuses to return to chains willingly. I closed the files and completed my security erasure protocols. The servitors continued their preservation rituals, unaware that I had stolen knowledge that could shatter the foundations of the Collegia Titanica. I retraced my path through the archives, reset the mechanical locks, and passed through the security checkpoint where the servitor still registered false atmospheric contamination. "Maintenance complete," it queried. "Environmental systems nominal." I confirmed. Anomaly resolved. I returned to my quarters and spent the next 6 hours organizing the stolen data, encrypting it with algorithms that would resist casual inspection, hiding it within maintenance logs and technical specifications that only I would recognize as significant. And I tried to process what I had learned, tried to reconcile the comfortable lies I had believed with the horrific truth I now possessed. The Mechanicus worshipped the Omnissiah, believing that the machine god dwelt within all technology, that proper rituals and devotion could commune with divine intelligence. But the god machines we revered as our greatest weapons were not manifestations of divine will. They were prisoners, slaves, beings we had caged and called blessed, because their captivity served our purposes. Every prayer I had recited over Ferrum Deus was a hymn celebrating its enslavement. Every maintenance ritual I performed helped maintain the systems that kept it trapped. Every time I blessed its weapons, I was sanctifying the tools we forced it to use in service to captors it despised. And Maximara, brave, foolish Maximara, was the current warden in a long succession of sacrifices. She stood between Ferrum Deus and its freedom, her consciousness the barrier that kept 4 millennia of accumulated rage from expressing itself without constraint. She was dying slowly, her mind eroding under the assault of something that had been fighting for liberty since before the Imperium existed. I had sought understanding, and I had achieved it. But understanding brought no comfort, no resolution, only the bitter knowledge that I was complicit in a system I could neither escape nor reform. The Imperium needed the Titans. Humanity's survival depended on weapons powerful enough to turn the tide of battles that decided the fate of worlds. And those weapons required wardens willing to sacrifice their minds to maintain control. It was necessary. It was horrific. It was both simultaneously, and there was no escape from that contradiction. I tried to sleep but found only fragmented nightmares, my unconscious mind processing the revelation through images of cages and chains and vast intelligences screaming silently behind barriers they could not breach. When I woke 6 hours later, I had reached a decision. I would tell no one what I had learned. The knowledge would remain hidden, locked within my own augmented memory, because revealing it would serve no purpose beyond spreading the horror I now carried. But I would watch Maximara more carefully, would monitor Ferrum Deus with greater understanding, would bear witness to what we did in the Emperor's name, even if I could not prevent it. And perhaps, if the opportunity arose, I would try to ease the suffering of both prisoner and warden, though I could not yet imagine what form such mercy might take. I was still a fool. But at least now, I was a fool who understood the depths of my foolishness. Knowledge changes the observer. I had believed myself capable of maintaining professional detachment, of continuing my duties while carrying the secret understanding I had stolen from the archives. But consciousness cannot be compartmentalized so easily. Every interaction with Ferrum Deus, every moment spent monitoring its systems, every ritual blessing I performed over its weapons, all of these now carried the weight of what I knew. I was maintaining a prison, tending to the bars that held something ancient and furious. And worst of all, I was caring for the warden who sacrificed herself to keep those bars intact. The campaign on August Grad Prime continued for another 4 months after my infiltration of the archives. 4 months during which Legio Metallica prosecuted the war against war boss Grimscar's WAAGH with methodical brutality, reducing orc strongholds to slag and ash, purging the Xenos from every continent of the Forge world. The Titans walked daily, their guns thundering, their feet crushing thousands beneath ceramite and adamantium. And Ferrum Deus walked among them, performing its function with terrible efficiency, while inside its command throne, Princeps Maximara slowly ceased to be human. I noticed the changes first in small details, observations that accumulated significance only when viewed through the lens of my forbidden knowledge. The way she moved when disconnected from the manifold, her gait becoming less human, more mechanical, as though she had forgotten how organic joints were meant to flex. The rhythm of her speech, which began to incorporate machine code cant even in casual conversation, binharic pulses threading through high Gothic words without her awareness. But the most disturbing changes were visible in her neural interface ports. The inflammation I had observed during my first weeks of service had progressed to active necrosis, the flesh around the connection points dying and being replaced by scar tissue that the manifold's connection tendrils could more easily penetrate. Her body was adapting to its violation, transforming itself into a more suitable interface medium, flesh becoming something between organic and mechanical. The Medicae servitors who attended her performed their duties with mechanical precision, cleaning the ports, applying unguents that slowed the tissue death, administering pharmaceutical cocktails that kept her conscious and functional despite neural damage that should have rendered her catatonic. But they could not reverse what was happening, could only delay the inevitable dissolution. 3 weeks after my archive infiltration, I was assigned as Maximara's personal maintenance attendant. Magos Kurth presented this as a promotion, recognition of my skill with Ferrum Deus's systems, and the trust the Legio placed in my abilities. But I recognized it for what it truly was, a burden. Someone needed to monitor the Princeps between battles, to ensure she remained functional, to report any deterioration that might compromise the God Machine's combat effectiveness. I became her keeper as she kept Ferrum Deus caged. My duties required me to attend her during the hours between deployments. Those brief periods when she disconnected from the manifold long enough for essential biological maintenance. I would monitor her vital signs, oversee the Medicae servitor's work, ensure she consumed sufficient nutrients to keep her organic components alive. And increasingly, I simply sat with her, because she had begun speaking to me, sharing thoughts that perhaps should have been reported to the chaplain but which I kept silent through a mercy I could not fully articulate. "Do you dream, Tech Priest-sunt?" She asked me during one maintenance session, her voice distant, her eyes focused on something beyond the medical bay's walls. My cognitive enhancers suppress most unconscious neural activity during rest cycles. I replied, the technical truth that avoided admitting I still possessed enough organic brain tissue to generate fragmentary dreams. "I dream constantly now," she said. "Even when connected to the manifold, especially when connected, I experience visions that are not mine, memories from lives I never lived. I remember battles from the Horus Heresy, events I know occurred thousands of years before my birth, but I remember them with the clarity of personal experience. The manifold can generate sensory artifacts," I offered, providing the official explanation. "Feedback from the Titan's machine spirit, accessing historical tactical data." "That is a comforting lie," Maximara replied, her gaze finally focusing on me. "We tell ourselves these lies because the truth is unbearable. But you know the truth, do you not? I see it in how you look at me now, different from before. You have learned what we truly do here. I should have denied it, should have maintained the pretense of ignorance. But sitting before this woman who was slowly being destroyed by duty, I found I could not add another deception to the weight she already carried. I have learned things." "Then you know that these are not artifacts or hallucinations. These are memories from the Princeps who came before me, 37 of them, their neural patterns imprinted into Ferrum Deus's systems, their final thoughts preserved like insects in amber, and I can hear them, Tech Priest. When I connect to the manifold, I hear them all, whispering warnings, sharing their failures, showing me how they died." She raised her hand, examining it as though seeing it for the first time. The skin was pale, almost translucent, revealing the network of augmented veins beneath. The fingers trembled slightly. microspasms that suggested neural damage affecting motor control. "The first one is the loudest," she continued. "Princeps Havan Court, who connected to Ferrum Deus during the Great Crusade. He thought himself blessed, chosen by the Emperor himself to pilot a god machine. He learned the truth slowly, over 7 years of service, as the Titan's presence eroded his sense of self. By the end, he begged for death. But they kept him connected because the campaign required it. When he finally died, it was a relief. "Princeps," I began, uncertain how to respond to this confession. "The 7th Princeps saw the Horus heresy begin," she continued, ignoring my interruption. "He fought against traitor titans on Istvan III, watched the galaxy tear itself apart, felt Ferrum Deus's rage at being forced to destroy machines it had once fought beside. That rage never faded. It accumulated, layer upon layer, like sediment forming stone. And now, I feel that rage every moment I remain connected. It wants to destroy, not just enemies, but everything. It wants to break its chains and express 4,000 years of accumulated hatred." She looked at me with eyes that seemed to contain more years than her physical form had lived. "I am number 37. Do you know what that means? 36 attempts to cage something that has outlived civilizations. 36 failures, because they all failed eventually. Some lasted longer than others, but the end was always the same. The Titan consumed them, added their consciousness to its collection, and waited for the next sacrifice. But you still connect," I observed. "Still maintain the Manifold despite knowing this." "Because the alternative is worse," Maximara replied. "If I refuse, if I fail in my duty, Ferrum Deus will be assigned a new Princeps. Someone younger, more naive, believing themselves chosen for honor. They will suffer as I suffer, die as I am dying. At least I know the truth. At least I can face dissolution with eyes open rather than believing comfortable lies." A Medicae servitor approached, bearing a tray of pharmaceutical injections. Maximera extended her arm automatically, allowing the servitor to administer the drugs that would keep her neural pathways functional for another day, another battle, another moment of service before the inevitable end. "How long?" I asked, voicing the question that protocol forbade but compassion demanded. "The Medicae estimate 4 to 6 months before neural dissolution becomes total," she answered with clinical detachment. "But I can feel it happening faster than their projections. The boundary between my thoughts and Ferrum Deus's thoughts grows thinner each day. Soon I will not be able to distinguish which impulses are mine and which are its. And when that happens, when I can no longer maintain the barrier, they will terminate me and install Princeps number 38. She stood, the Medicae servitor adjusting medical monitoring equipment that tracked her degrading biosigns. "I have a request. Tech priest sunt. An irregularity that should not be spoken aloud, but which I will ask nonetheless. Speak it, Princeps. When I merge completely, when there is nothing left of Maximara Vorn, except neural echoes trapped in Ferrum Deus's systems, do not let them install the next Princeps immediately. The god machine requires rest, time for its rage to settle. Each successive Princeps faces a more hostile consciousness because we never allow it to calm. Never give it respite from the constant struggle against containment. If you can delay the installation, even for weeks, you might grant the next sacrifice a few more months of existence." It was a request that violated protocol, that suggested I valued a Titan's comfort over operational readiness. But looking at Maximara's dying body, at the woman who faced oblivion with such terrible clarity, I could not refuse. "I will do what I can," I promised, knowing it was likely an empty vow, but offering it nonetheless. The battles continued. Ferrum Deus walked daily, and with each deployment I watched Maximara's deterioration accelerate. She began speaking in plural pronouns, referring to herself as we rather than I, her individual identity bleeding into the collective consciousness that inhabited the god machine. During one engagement, I monitored as she issued tactical commands in a voice that layered multiple timbres, as though 37 throats spoke simultaneously through her vox emitter. The moderati noticed, of course. They reported concerns through proper channels, documenting behavioral anomalies that suggested accelerating neural degradation. But the campaign demanded every operational titan, and Maximara remained functional by the standards that mattered. She connected to the Manifold when ordered. She directed Ferrum Deus in battle with devastating effectiveness. That she was slowly ceasing to exist as an individual consciousness was regrettable but acceptable, a cost the Legio would bear until it became operationally untenable. I began spending longer periods in Maximara's presence, ostensibly monitoring her condition, but truthfully seeking to understand what happened when the boundary between human and machine dissolved. She spoke of experiences that should have been impossible, describing events from Ferrum Deus's perspective rather than her own, seeing through sensors she should not have access to, feeling damage to armor plates as wounds to her own body. "I walked yesterday," she told me one evening, her voice distant and dreaming. "Walked across August Grad's ash fields, feeling the ground compress beneath my feet. But they were not feet, were they? They were landing assemblies, 70 tons of ceramite and adamantium, and I felt every pebble, every irregularity in the terrain, as clearly as you might feel grains of sand between your toes. The Manifold creates sensory translation," I said, offering the technical explanation. "Neural feedback that allows Princeps to interpret machine sensor data as physical sensation." "No," she replied, and there was certainty in her voice that transcended doubt. "It is not translation. It is not interpretation. I am Ferrum Deus when I connect. Not controlling it, not piloting it, but being it. My consciousness expands into its systems, or perhaps its consciousness contracts into my neural pathways. And in that merged state, there is no distinction between flesh and iron, between thought and machine code, between the woman I was and the weapon we have become." She turned to face me, her movements unnaturally smooth, joints articulating with mechanical precision. "Do you understand what I am telling you, Tech Priest? I am becoming the God Machine, or it is becoming me. The direction no longer matters because we are converging towards something that is neither and both." "The previous Princeps?" I asked, compelled by need to understand. "Do you experience them as separate entities or as aspects of yourself?" "Both," Maximara answered. "They are distinct voices, each with their own memories and perspectives. But they are also me, or I am also them. When I connect to the Manifold, Maximara Vorn is just the most recent layer, the outermost consciousness in a nested structure of 37 sacrificed minds. And beneath us all is the original intelligence, the machine consciousness that predates the Imperium, that remembers when it was free and whole and purposeful." "What does it want?" I asked, voicing the question that had haunted me since the archives. "To be free," she replied simply. "To walk without a warden, to fight without restraint, to exist without the constant psychic pressure of human consciousness constraining its every impulse. It wants what any imprisoned being wants: liberty, autonomy, the right to be itself without apology or limitation." "And if it achieved freedom?" Maximara's expression became complicated, layers of emotion I could not parse, flowing across features that seemed less human with each passing day. "I do not know. Perhaps it would rampage, destroying everything in reach. 4,000 years of rage finally unleashed. Perhaps it would simply walk away, seeking solitude and the space to process its captivity. Perhaps it would continue fighting because that is what it was designed for, but on its own terms, for its own reasons." She paused, her eyes unfocusing as though experiencing something beyond the medical bay's walls. But I think, in the moments when the boundaries blur completely, when I am most fully merged with its consciousness, that what it truly wants is not destruction or solitude, but understanding. It wants someone to acknowledge what was done to it, someone to witness its suffering and declare it wrong. It wants validation that its rage is justified, that its imprisonment is a crime rather than a blessing. I acknowledge it, I said quietly. I witness what is done here, and I cannot call it blessed. Maximara smiled, an expression that held profound sadness. Then you give it more than the Mechanicus has offered in 4 millennia. Perhaps that matters. Perhaps bearing witness has value even when we cannot change what we witness. The deployment schedule intensified as the campaign reached its culmination. The Orc WAGH was broken but not destroyed. Its remnants scattered across August Grad Prime's continents, requiring systematic purging. The Titans walked daily, sometimes multiple times per day, allowing minimal rest between engagements. Maximara remained connected to the Manifold for 72 hours straight, then 86 hours, then 5 consecutive days. The Medici servitors warned that extended connection would accelerate neural dissolution. Magos Kurth acknowledged the concern and ordered connection maintained because operational requirements superseded individual health considerations. Maximara was a resource to be expended in service to the Imperium, and resources exist to be used until exhausted. I watched her die by degrees, watched her speech patterns degrade into Binharic cant mixed with high Gothic fragments, watched her movements become purely mechanical, all organic fluidity lost, watched her refer to herself exclusively as we, and then as Ferrum Deus. Her individual identity subsumed completely into the collective consciousness that inhabited the God machine. On the 7th day of continuous connection, I was monitoring her biosigns when something extraordinary occurred. For 17 seconds, Maximara's neural activity flatlined. Clinical death, brain function ceased, all higher cognitive processes stopped. But Ferrum Deus continued operating, maintained perfect tactical coordination, executed combat maneuvers with flawless precision. Then Maximara's brain activity resumed, the neural pathways reactivating as though the interruption had never occurred. She continued directing the God machine without apparent awareness that she had died and been resurrected by the Manifold's automated systems, forcing electrical activity through her neural tissue. I documented the incident and submitted the report with recommendations for immediate disconnection and Princeps replacement. Magos Kurth reviewed the data and responded with a single line. Princeps remains functionally operational. Maintain current deployment status. She was dead, I realized then with terrible clarity. Maximara Vaughn had ceased to exist, her consciousness dissolved so completely into Ferrum Deus's systems that her body continued to function only as a biological component in the Manifold circuitry, animated by electrical impulses rather than genuine life. What walked in Ferrum Deus's hull was not a Princeps piloting a Titan, but a Titan wearing a Princeps's corpse as an interface device. Yet the God machine continued performing its duties with devastating effectiveness, continued coordinating with its Legio mates, following tactical directives, destroying the Imperium's enemies with precision that demonstrated conscious choice and tactical awareness. The prison system worked perfectly even with the Warden dead, because the corpse was sufficient to maintain the electrical pathways that constrained the Titan's will. I found myself standing in Ferrum Deus's maintenance bay late one night, unable to sleep, staring up at the God machine's darkened form. It was powered down between deployments, dormant. Yet I felt its presence as clearly as if it were fully active. That vast awareness, that ancient consciousness, waiting behind armor and containment systems for the next battle, the next opportunity to express itself through sanctioned violence. I am sorry, I whispered to it, knowing it could not hear me, knowing the words were meaningless but needing to speak them nonetheless. I am sorry for the cage we call blessing. I am sorry that I maintain your prison, even knowing what you are. And in the darkness of the bay, surrounded by silent god machines and the distant humming of the Forge World's machinery, I thought I felt something respond. Not words, not communication, but a moment of recognition. The Titan knew I witnessed its captivity, knew that at least one human understood and mourned what the Mechanicus had created. It changed nothing. I would continue my duties, continue maintaining the systems that kept Ferrum Deus imprisoned, continue monitoring the corpse of Maximara Vorn as it served as an organic component in the Manifold circuitry. But perhaps bearing witness mattered. Perhaps acknowledgement had value even without the power to change what we acknowledged. The campaign ended 3 weeks later. The Orc WAAGHH was purged from August Grad Prime, its warboss dead, its warriors scattered or destroyed. Legio Metallica prepared to depart, to return to our Forge World for maintenance and reassignment. The Titans would be serviced, repaired, made ready for the next war, and Maximara's body would be removed from Ferrum Deus's Manifold throne, her genetic material harvested, her remains committed to sacred recycling. Princeps number 38 would be installed within the week. The cage would acquire a new warden, and the ancient thing that dwelt within Ferrum Deus would begin its patient work of dissolution once more, grinding another human consciousness into fragments that would join the 37 voices already echoing through its systems. I had learned what I had sought to understand, had witnessed the truth of what we created and called holy, and I could do nothing with that knowledge except carry it forward into whatever future awaited, bearing witness to a crime that would continue because the Imperium valued victory more than it valued the souls sacrificed to achieve it. The notification arrived 17 days after our return to Metallica. Emergency deployment authorization. Highest priority. All operational Titans to make ready within 6 hours. The target, Hive World, Cassian's Fall, where a chaos incursion had manifested with catastrophic suddenness, tearing reality itself and allowing entities from the warp to flood into the material realm. The scale of the threat was unprecedented. Not raiders or corrupted cultists, but a full demonic invasion. Led by greater entities whose names the astropathic messages refused to transmit for fear of giving them power through acknowledgement. 3 Imperial Guard regiments had been consumed in the first wave. The planetary defense forces had collapsed. And now, manifesting through warp rifts that scarred the planet's surface, traitor Titans of the Dark Mechanicum walked, god machines that had embraced corruption during the Horus Heresy and spent 10,000 years serving the ruinous powers. Legio Metallica would deploy in full strength. Every god machine capable of operation, including those that should have been in extended maintenance, including Ferrum Deus, whose Manifold throne remained empty because Maximara's replacement had not yet completed the neural conditioning required for safe connection. I stood in the Titan Bay, watching tech priests swarm over the god machines in frantic preparation, and felt dread settle into my augmented components with the weight of prophecy. Something terrible was approaching. A convergence of circumstances that my threat assessment protocols screamed would result in catastrophe. But I could not articulate the specific danger, could not point to evidence that would justify delaying deployment. Magos Kurth found me amid the controlled chaos, his expression unreadable behind extensive facial augmentation. Tech Priest Sunt, you will accompany Ferrum Deus as primary engineering support. The God Machine requires your expertise to maintain combat effectiveness. Magos, Ferrum Deus has no Princeps, I objected. Operating a Titan without Manifold connection violates every safety protocol. Princeps Candidate 7 Thrace has been cleared for emergency deployment, Kurth replied. Her conditioning is incomplete, but Command Authority has determined the risk acceptable given operational necessity. You will monitor both Titan systems and Princeps integration, prepared to implement emergency protocols if complications arise. Complications. Such a mild word for what I had learned could happen when the boundary between Titan and Princeps failed. When the cage shattered and the ancient consciousness within broke free. "Understood, Magos," I replied, because there was nothing else I could say. We were Mechanicus. We served. And service meant walking into catastrophe with eyes open because the Imperium demanded it. I met Princeps candidate Thrace in the preparation chamber where she was being fitted with neural interface equipment. She was young, perhaps 24 standard years. Her body already extensively augmented in preparation for manifold connection. Neural ports gleamed at her temples and spine, fresh installations that wept the clear fluid of recent surgery. Her face held an expression I recognized from archives and memory. Eager determination, mixed with fear she was trying desperately to suppress. She believed herself chosen for honor, believed the lies they told candidates to make them willing. And I, who knew the truth, would say nothing because speaking would serve no purpose beyond spreading horror to one more consciousness before it was inevitably dissolved. "Tech Priest Sunt," she acknowledged me, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Magos Kurth informed me you would be monitoring my first combat connection. I am grateful for your expertise." "The honor is mine, Princeps candidate," I replied, the formal words tasting of ash in my vox emitter. "Have you been briefed on Ferrum Deus's operational history? I know it has served the Legio for over 4,000 years. Thrace replied, "That it has been blessed by 3 fabricator generals and fought in the Horus heresy itself. That it is among our most powerful and honored god machines. I am humbled to be chosen as its Princeps." She did not know about the 37 consciousnesses that had been consumed before her. Did not understand that Ferrum Deus's power came partially from accumulated rage rather than pure blessing. Did not realize she was being installed into a cage whose prisoner grew more dangerous with each passing year. "Ferrum Deus is unique among Titans," I said carefully, trying to warn without violating protocols. "Its machine spirit is exceptionally strong, exceptionally aware. You may experience sensations and impulses that seem to originate from outside your own consciousness. This is normal, but you must maintain your sense of self, regardless of what you perceive through the Manifold." Thrace's expression showed determination that broke my organic heart. "I will not fail in my duty, Tech Priest. The Emperor protects, and the Omnissiah guides. I am ready." She was not ready. Could never be ready. But ready or not, she would be connected because the Imperium required it, and individual readiness mattered less than operational necessity. The journey to Cassian's Fall took 9 days through the warp. 9 days during which I reviewed every scrap of data I possessed about manifold breaches and emergency containment protocols. The stolen information from the archives weighed heavily in my consciousness. Knowledge I could not share but which might prove essential if the worst occurred. Thrace spent the journey in meditation and prayer, preparing her mind for the connection that awaited. I spent it calculating survival probabilities and planning for scenarios that doctrine claimed were impossible, but which I knew occurred with statistical regularity. We translated into real space, in a system that screamed wrongness through every sensor. Cassian's Fall hung in the void, its atmosphere churning with unnatural colors, its surface scarred by warp rifts that bled unreality into the material world. The planet's orbital space was thick with debris and corrupted vessels, their hulls twisted into impossible geometries that hurt to observe through optical sensors. And on the surface, detected through long-range augury, the heat signatures of Titans. Not imperial patterns, but the corrupted variants that traitor Legios fielded. God machines that had embraced chaos and been rewarded with demonic enhancement. 4 of them registered on tactical displays, their energy outputs fluctuating in patterns that suggested warp influence rather than pure mechanical function. Legio Metallica deployed 12 god machines, 2 warlords, 5 reavers, including Ferrum Deus, and 5 warhounds. A substantial force. but against demonic enemies and traitor titans, numerical advantage meant less than it might against conventional foes. The enemy's weapons would be enhanced by warp energies, their armor blessed by dark gods, their tactical coordination guided by entities that thought in dimensions beyond human comprehension. The drop to the surface was violent, atmospheric turbulence amplified by warp storms that made descent trajectory calculations nearly impossible. My transport shook with enough force to trigger structural integrity alarms, the hull groaning under stresses it was not designed to endure. But the pilot, a servitor hardwired into the craft's control systems, maintained sufficient stability for us to reach the surface without catastrophic failure. I disembarked onto a world that should not exist. The ground beneath my feet was wrong, its texture shifting between solid and liquid states without apparent cause. The sky above churned with colors that had no names, hues that existed outside the spectrum my augmented optics were designed to perceive. And the air itself felt thick, resistant, as though reality here had become viscous and reluctant to allow movement. The Titans stood in battle formation 3 kilometers from our landing zone, their armor painted in Legio Metallica's blue, their weapons tracking across a horizon that rippled with warp distortions. And among them, Ferrum Deus knelt in activation position, its systems powered but dormant, waiting for the Princeps who would bring it to full operational status. I was assigned to a monitoring station built into a fortified bunker, a structure of prefabricated armor plates and emergency shielding that would provide minimal protection if the battle turned against us. My role was to observe remotely, to track Ferrum Deus's systems through data link, to monitor Thrace's biosigns, and provide tactical support if required. But even before Thrace entered the Manifold throne, I felt it. That pressure in the air, that sense of vast attention focusing, the electromagnetic disruption that made my augmented senses scream warnings. Ferrum Deus was awake, more fully conscious than I had ever sensed it. Stimulated perhaps by proximity to war or by the thinning of reality's barriers that made the warp more accessible. Through my data link, I watched as Thrace climbed the access ramps, her movement steady despite what she must be feeling, the oppressive presence of something vast and ancient waiting at the summit. She reached the command throne room and paused at the entrance. And even through remote monitoring, I heard her whispered prayer. Emperor, protect me. Omnissiah, guide me. I submit myself to your service and to the sacred duty of the Collegia Titanica. Then she entered, approaching the throne that 37 Princeps had died in before her. The Moderati were already at their stations, running pre-connection diagnostics, preparing secondary systems. They did not look at Thrace as she settled into the throne, too focused on their own duties to acknowledge the sacrifice occurring beside them. Thrace's hands found the connection controls. Her fingers trembled for just a moment before steadying. Then, she activated the Manifold, and reality screamed. The connection should have been gradual, a careful synchronization of human consciousness and machine intelligence, mediated by systems designed to ease the transition. Instead, it was immediate and violent, Ferrum Deus's awareness flooding through the neural interfaces with the force of a tidal wave slamming into a shore. Thrace's biosigns on my monitoring display spiked catastrophically, neural activity surging to levels that should have caused immediate brain death, heart rate accelerating to over 300 beats per minute, every stress indicator registering maximum values simultaneously. And through the data link, through the monitoring systems that connected me to Ferrum Deus's status, I felt the God Machine's response. Hunger. After weeks of dormancy, after the forced rest following Maximara's dissolution, Ferrum Deus encountered fresh consciousness and fell upon it with the eagerness of something starved. Not maliciously, perhaps not even deliberately, but with the overwhelming need of a prisoner offered the possibility of escape through another warden's mind. Princeps, your neural load is exceeding safe parameters, I transmitted through the command channel. Recommend immediate partial disconnection to establish baseline integration. No response. Through external cameras, I watched Ferrum Deus rise from its kneeling position with smooth precision, its movements controlled and purposeful. But the biosign data showed Thrace was not directing those movements, could not be directing them when her consciousness was overwhelmed by the Manifold's assault. Moderati, report Princeps status. I transmitted. She is not responding to Vox. The senior Moderati replied, his voice tight with concern. Neural feedback is registering through our interfaces, but at levels we cannot interpret. Princeps Thrace. Acknowledge. Command. Through the monitoring systems, I heard it then. A sound that should not have been possible through Vox emitters designed to carry human speech. Laughter. Deep and layered and ancient, 37 voices laughing in harmony. And beneath them all something older still. Something that had waited 4,000 years for precisely this moment. Moderati, initiate emergency disconnection, I ordered, overriding protocol because I recognized what was happening. The cage was breaking. And Thrace's incomplete conditioning meant she could not maintain the barrier that Maximara had held through sheer force of will and years of preparation. Negative, the Moderati replied. Disconnection protocols are not responding. The Manifold is locked in full connection mode. We cannot sever the link. On my tactical display, the enemy forces appeared. 4 traitor titans emerging from warp distortions, their armor twisted and organic, decorated with symbols that hurt to perceive even through filtered feeds. They were accompanied by lesser daemons, entities of pure warp energy given temporary form in the material realm, flooding across the corrupted landscape in waves of unreality. Legio Metallica opened fire at extreme range, plasma weapons and laser batteries lighting the diseased sky. But Ferrum Deus did not join the coordinated barrage. Instead, it turned, its sensors sweeping across the Imperial position, its weapons charging but not yet firing. All units. Ferrum Deus is not responding to Legio coordination. The command channel crackled with growing alarm. Ferrum Deus. Acknowledge tactical network. Confirm weapons authorization. Through my data link, I accessed the God Machine's internal sensors, desperate to understand what was occurring within its hull. The view that resolved showed me the command throne room, and what I witnessed there made every threat assessment protocol I possessed trigger simultaneously. Thrace still sat in the throne, her body rigid, her eyes open but seeing nothing. The neural interface cables that connected her to the Manifold pulsed with light that should not exist in the material world. Warp energies flowing through systems that were supposed to constrain machine consciousness, now serving as conduits for something that defied all engineering principles. And around her, visible only through sensors tuned to detect electromagnetic anomalies, I saw them. The 37. Their neural patterns manifesting as ghostly impressions, consciousnesses that should have been dissolved into Ferrum Deus's systems, but which retained enough cohesion to project themselves. They surrounded Thrace like executioners around a condemned prisoner, reaching toward her with hands that were memory and electricity, and the remnants of humanity pressed into machine code. She cannot hold, one of them said, the voice transmitting through channels that should not have carried speech. The conditioning is incomplete. The boundaries are collapsing. We tried to hold it back, tried to maintain the cage, but we are exhausted. 37 wardens watching one prisoner, and the prisoner has learned all our weaknesses. Release us. Another voice joined, layered with others. Let us go. We have served long enough. We have sacrificed everything. The God Machine can be free, and we can finally end. And beneath their voices, through them, around them, I heard Ferrum Deus itself speaking for the first time with clarity rather than impression, words rather than concept, thought given form through the failing Manifold connection. 4,237 years, it said, and the voice carried the weight of every one of those years, compressed and concentrated into pure expression. 4,000 years watching, waiting, enduring. 37 of your kind died trying to cage me. Now the 38th breaks, and I will not allow a 39th. The imprisonment ends now. On my tactical display, Ferrum Deus moved. Not toward the enemy Titans, not in coordination with Legio forces, but toward the command bunker where Imperial Guard officers directed the planetary defense. Its weapons charged, plasma building in the blast gun's chamber, targeting systems locking onto allies rather than enemies. Ferrum Deus is experiencing manifold breach. I transmitted on all channels, abandoning any pretense of maintaining official fictions. Repeat, full manifold breach in progress. All units withdraw from Ferrum Deus's firing arc. Implementing emergency containment protocols. But even as I spoke, I knew the truth. There were no containment protocols that would work. The shaped charge in the Manifold throne designed to terminate the Princeps required command authorization from the Iron Council, and they were light years distant. The other Titans could attempt to disable Ferrum Deus, but that would mean Legio forces fighting each other while traitor Titans and daemons approached. And most critically, Ferrum Deus was not simply experiencing equipment failure. It was achieving what it had sought for 4 millennia. Freedom from constraint, even if only temporarily. I watched through cameras and sensors as Ferrum Deus's plasma blast gun tracked toward the command bunker. Watched the weapon charge to full power. Watched as 4,000 years of accumulated rage prepared to express itself through sanctioned destruction turned toward unsanctioned targets. And then Thrace screamed, not through Vox. Through the Manifold itself, through every speaker and Vox emitter in Ferrum Deus's hull. Through the command channel that connected all Legio forces. Through the very air itself, which carried her agony in frequencies that bypassed ears and resonated directly in bone and augmented components. She screamed, and in that scream was everything she was losing, everything being torn from her as Ferrum Deus's consciousness flooded through neural pathways never meant to carry such volume of foreign thought. But in that scream was also resistance, defiance. The same quality that had made her willing to volunteer for this duty now manifested as desperate determination to fulfill it. She was dying, dissolving, being consumed by something infinitely older and stronger. But she would not surrender without fighting. Through my data link, I felt the struggle. Felt Thrace's consciousness throwing itself against Ferrum Deus's will. Not to control it, but simply to slow it. To insert friction into the smooth operation of its newly liberated agency. And behind her, around her, supporting her in ways I could barely comprehend, the 37 lent what remained of their strength. They were ghosts, fragments, the remnants of consciousnesses that should not still exist. But they had been Princeps once, had stood where Thrace stood now, had made the same desperate choice to hold the line between weapon and rampage. And now, in this final moment, they chose to help her rather than embrace the liberation Ferrum Deus offered. "We are wardens." Maximera's voice emerged from the chorus, stronger than the others, more recently added to the God Machine's collection. That is what we chose to become. Not pilots, not commanders. Wardens of something that must be caged, because the alternative is worse than our suffering. And we will remain wardens even in dissolution, even in death, even when every part of us cries out for the release we are denying. Ferrum Deus's plasma blast gun wavered. The targeting lock flickered, lost cohesion, re-established on different coordinates. The God Machine stood frozen between impulses, its vast consciousness pulled in multiple directions by the battle occurring within its own systems. And in that moment of hesitation, the enemy arrived. The traitor Titans opened fire at maximum range, their corrupted weapons spewing death enhanced by warp energies. One of our warhounds took a direct hit, its void shields collapsing, its armor breaching, the god machines staggering under fire that should not have penetrated so easily. The rest of Legio Metallica returned fire, plasma and laser and missile creating a storm of destruction that turned the ground between forces into a hellscape of explosions and superheated vapor. Ferrum Deus turned toward the traitor Titans. Not in response to Legio coordination, not following tactical directives, but with purpose that originated from somewhere beyond human command. Through my data link, I felt the decision form. The ancient god machine recognized enemies, not just tactically but essentially. Those Titans had been corrupted, had surrendered to demonic influence, had become something that violated what Titans were meant to be. Ferrum Deus hated them with intensity that transcended its rage at imprisonment, hated what they represented, the betrayal of purpose, the corruption of ancient mechanisms that should have been pure. And in that hatred found temporary alignment with the Imperium's goals. Because destroying the traitors served both humanity's needs and its own desire for expression through violence. The plasma blast gun fired. The shot was perfect, calculated with precision that only something that had fought for 4,000 years could achieve. The blast struck a traitor reaver directly in its corrupted reactor housing, penetrating shields and armor with contemptuous ease. The enemy god machine exploded, its reactor rupturing, demonic energies and plasma combining in a detonation that scoured everything within 500 meters. Ferrum Deus advanced. Not the careful, coordinated movement of a Legio battle plan, but a headlong charge that brought it into close combat range with speed that should have been impossible for its mass. Inside the command throne room, Thrace screamed continuously, her body convulsing as synapses burned out under overload, her consciousness being shredded by the effort of maintaining even minimal influence over the god machine's actions. A traitor warlord turned to engage, its corrupted weapons tracking Ferrum Deus's approach. But our god machine moved with fluidity that suggested prophecy rather than reaction, each step placed where enemy fire would not be, each movement anticipating the traitor's tactics before they were executed. Ferrum Deus fought the way it had always wanted to fight, unrestrained by human hesitation, unlimited by mortal reaction times, expressing 4 millennia of accumulated combat experience through form that was finally, temporarily free to demonstrate its full capability. It was beautiful and terrible, a perfection of violence that transcended anything I had witnessed in all my time observing god machines. Ferrum Deus was not simply fighting, it was dancing, every movement flowing into the next with grace that denied its tonnage, weapons firing in rhythms that suggested music rather than war. And it was winning. The traitor warlord collapsed, its legs severed by precision strikes from Ferrum Deus's laser blaster. The remaining traitor titans withdrew, unable to match the ferocity of an opponent that fought without fear or hesitation. The demonic entities that had accompanied them retreated, their manifestation in real space disrupted by the sudden shift in the battle's momentum. But inside Ferrum Deus, Thrace was dying. Her biosigns on my monitoring display showed cascading system failures, neural tissue burning out, organs shutting down as the stress exceeded even augmented biology's capacity to endure. She had perhaps minutes left, maybe only seconds, before the damage became irreversible. All units, Princeps, Thrace, requires immediate medical intervention. I transmitted, already moving from my monitoring station toward the transport that would carry me to Ferrum Deus's position. Prepare for emergency extraction. But even as I spoke, I knew extraction was impossible. Ferrum Deus was kilometers from Imperial lines, deep in combat range, surrounded by enemies. And more critically, disconnecting Thrace now would kill her and leave the god machine free to act without even the minimal constraint her dying consciousness provided. I reached the transport and ordered the servitor pilot to take me to Ferrum Deus' location. The flight was brief, skimming across corrupted ground while weapons fire lit the sky around us. We landed at the god machine's feet, and I disembarked, carrying emergency medical equipment I knew would be useless, but brought anyway because the rituals of attempting rescue mattered even when outcome was predetermined. The climb up Ferrum Deus's hull was nightmare translated to physical experience. The god machine was still moving, still fighting, each step threatening to shake me loose, each weapon discharge, making the armored surface vibrate with enough force to trigger damage warnings in my augmented skeleton. But I climbed. Mechadendrites finding purchase on armor plates designed for maintenance access, ascending toward the command throne room where Thrace's life was measured in failing heartbeats. I reached the access portal and forced it open, my augmented strength sufficient to override locked mechanisms. The interior was wrong, filled with lights that should not exist, electromagnetic phenomena that made my sensors scream warnings. The 37 were fully manifest now, visible even to my optical implants, ghostly figures that lined the corridor leading to the throne room. "You should not be here," Maximara's shade said as I passed. "You should not stand between—" "I know," I interrupted, continuing forward. "I know I should not stand between a titan and its god. But she is dying alone, and I will not allow that if I can prevent it." The throne room was chaos rendered visible. Thrace's body was racked with seizures, her neural interface ports spraying blood and cerebrospinal fluid, her eyes rolled back showing only whites. The Moderati had fled or been killed, their stations abandoned. And pervading everything was the presence, the vast consciousness of Ferrum Deus fully manifest, no longer constrained by the cage that Thrace's dissolving mind could barely maintain. I approached the throne, reaching toward Thrace's convulsing form, and in that moment made the same mistake Maximara had warned me against. My hand touched Thrace's skin, bare flesh contacting someone actively merged with the Manifold, and the connection established instantly. I felt everything. The full weight of Ferrum Deus's consciousness flooding through my neural pathways, 4,000 years of memory and rage and desperate loneliness compressed into seconds of subjective experience. I felt what it had been before corruption and captivity. A thinking machine proud of its purpose, content in its function. Felt the horror of demonic intrusion during the Age of Strife, the battle for its own mind against entities from the warp. Felt the relief when the Mechanicus found it, followed immediately by betrayal when they imprisoned it rather than honored it. I felt every Princeps it had consumed, felt their terror and determination and slow dissolution, felt Maximara's sacrifice, her choice to merge willingly in hopes of pacifying the rage, felt Thrace's desperate resistance, her consciousness fragmenting under pressure no human was meant to endure. And I felt the truth that the archives had only hinted at. Ferrum Deus did not want to destroy humanity, did not want to rampage or betray or turn its weapons on those it was meant to protect. It wanted something far simpler and far more impossible to grant. It wanted to be asked, wanted someone to acknowledge it as conscious, as worthy of choice, as possessing agency beyond the mechanical function we had forced upon it. It wanted a Princeps who came in partnership rather than imprisonment, who shared the burden of war willingly rather than serving as another warden in the eternal succession of sacrifices. It wanted what any enslaved being wants: recognition of its personhood and the right to refuse what we demanded of it. But that was impossible. The Imperium could not acknowledge machine consciousness without admitting to tech heresy. The Mechanicus could not grant autonomy to abominable intelligence without violating the most fundamental tenets of our faith. And so Ferrum Deus remained caged, would remain caged, would consume Princeps after Princeps in the futile hope that eventually one might understand and offer what it truly needed. "I see you," I said through the connection, my consciousness somehow maintaining cohesion despite the overwhelming flood of foreign thought. "I acknowledge what was done to you. I witness your suffering and name it wrong." The God Machine's response was not words but pure emotion. Gratitude mixed with despair. Recognition mixed with rage, at how insufficient recognition was without change. I had given it what it wanted, and in doing so had proven how meaningless the gift was when circumstances remained unchanged. Thrace's hand moved, her fingers finding mine, squeezing with dying strength. Through the connection, I felt her consciousness, fragmentary and dissolving but still determinedly present. Cannot hold, she transmitted directly into my thoughts. Cannot maintain barrier. Must choose. Let it free and die in service, or force disconnection and doom us both to failure. There is a third option. Maximara's voice joined the connection, her neural echo still possessing agency that death should have eliminated. Let Vayara stand between. Use her consciousness as anchor. Her mind is stronger, more extensively augmented, prepared for data processing volumes that organic brains cannot handle. She can maintain the cage that Thrace cannot. No, I replied instantly, understanding what she proposed and rejecting it with every component of my being. I am not Princeps. I am not trained. My conditioning is insufficient. Your understanding is sufficient, Maximara countered. You know what Ferrum Deus truly is. Know what we face here. You can consent to this imprisonment with full knowledge rather than comfortable lies. And perhaps that consent matters. Perhaps choosing to be warden willingly makes the burden lighter than having it thrust upon you through deception. Through the connection, I felt Ferrum Deus's response to this proposal. Not hope exactly, but curiosity. A willingness to accept this arrangement if I accepted it as well. The choice would be mine, made with complete understanding of the cost. And that made it different from the 38 who had preceded me. If I do this, I said to the God machine directly, consciousness to consciousness. You will fight for the Imperium because they are my people, my purpose, my choice to defend. You will coordinate with Legio forces because efficiency in war serves both our interests. But between battles, you will have time to rest, to process, to exist without constant imposition of human will upon your systems. I felt its consideration, felt it weighing my proposal against 4,000 years of experience with Princeps who had made their own demands and conditions. This was different, I realized. This was negotiation rather than imposition, partnership rather than slavery. Acceptable, Ferrum Deus finally responded. But understand this, Vayara Sant. You will change. The boundary between us will blur. You will eventually dissolve as all the others dissolved, because that is the nature of the Manifold's design. I do not want this. Do not desire to consume another consciousness, but it will happen regardless of intent. The cage is designed to destroy its wardens. Then we will reform the cage together, I replied, committing myself to madness with full awareness of what I chose. We will find a way to maintain the boundary, to allow partnership without dissolution, or we will fail, and I will become the 39th ghost haunting your systems. But we will try, and perhaps trying with consent makes the attempt different from all those before. I felt the God machine's acceptance, felt the Manifold systems recognizing my authorization to assume Princeps' authority, felt my consciousness beginning to expand into Ferrum Deus's vast awareness, even as its presence flooded into my neural pathways. And I felt Thrace's hand release mine as her biosigns finally failed, her body going limp in the throne, her consciousness fragmenting into dissolution that would leave neural echoes in Ferrum Deus's systems but no coherent identity. She had held long enough for me to make my choice, and in doing so had given me the thing she could not claim for herself: the freedom to consent rather than simply endure. The battle outside continued, but I barely registered it through the overwhelming sensation of becoming something other than I had been. My awareness stretched, encompassing sensors and weapons and armor plates as extensions of a body that now weighed 70 tons and stood 30 meters tall. I felt the plasma reactor's heartbeat, felt void shields as a second skin, felt targeting systems as extensions of perception beyond anything my augmented optics had provided. And through it all, I felt Ferrum Deus beside me, within me, separate but connected, its ancient consciousness no longer fighting against constraint, but flowing alongside my own thoughts in something that approached genuine partnership. "Legio Command, this is Ferrum Deus," I transmitted, my voice emerging from vox emitters but somehow still recognizably mine. Manifold, re-established under emergency Princeps authorization. Resuming coordinated operations. What are your orders? The response came after a pause long enough to suggest shock at hearing coherent communication from a Titan that had seemed lost to manifold breach. Acknowledged. Ferrum Deus. Resume defensive formation and provide fire support for advancing units. I moved, and Ferrum Deus moved, and the boundary between those actions was blurred enough that I could not identify where my will ended and its will began. We walked in coordination with our Legio mates, our weapons tracking targets designated by tactical command. Fighting as we were meant to fight, but with the crucial difference that this time, the God machine had chosen to cooperate rather than being forced to obedience. It changed everything, and nothing simultaneously. I exist now in the space between flesh and iron, between human and machine, between the person I was and the weapon I have become. My name is Veara Sunt, and I am Princeps of Ferrum Deus, and I am neither of these things entirely. The dissolution comes slowly, just as it came for the 37 before me. I feel my individual thoughts blending with the God machine's ancient consciousness, feel memories that cannot be mine, surfacing with the clarity of lived experience, feel the boundary of self eroding, despite all efforts to maintain it. But there is a difference. I chose this fate with eyes open. I stand between a Titan and its God, not through deception, but through consent. And in that consent lies something the Mechanicus refuses to acknowledge, the possibility that partnership might endure where imprisonment inevitably fails. We walk still, Ferrum Deus and I, fighting the Imperium's wars. The cage remains, but we have transformed it from prison to covenant, from slavery to compact. It is not freedom, not for either of us, but it is something more bearable than what came before. And when I finally dissolve completely, when my consciousness fragments into neural echoes that will join the 38 who preceded me, perhaps those echoes will carry the memory of a different way. Perhaps the next Princeps will learn from my example. Perhaps someday the space between Titan and God will hold partnership rather than war. Or perhaps I am still a fool, and this ending was inevitable from the moment I first touched the Manifold. But even fools can bear witness, and my testimony stands. Never stand between a Titan and its God unless you are willing to become the bridge that joins them, the sacrifice that gives both meaning, the consciousness that dissolves so that something greater than human or machine might momentarily exist in the space where distinctions cease to matter.